right, good afternoon, everyone. We'll go ahead and call the commission business meeting to order. This is the 75th annual meeting, even though most years we had two meetings, so I don't know how that math works out. And my understanding is that Dave Donaldson, as executive director, attended the majority of those meetings. We talked about that this morning, and so I will say that I think we have had a great history, and where the commission has come over those 75 years is pretty amazing, and I think has um, a storied past, but also a beneficial past to all the Gulf states. So, from my perspective, I'm very appreciative of all the work that the commission does, and I want to take a quick moment to thank all the commission staff that is around the room. Thank you guys for everything that you do to help setting up these meetings, all the work that you do all year long to help the states with their data and all the other issues that we have. I mentioned this morning to the executive director that I have never failed to get a return call, never failed to get support from the staff, and usually, sorry, flying here, usually I'm the short end of the stick. So thank you guys for everything that you do, and just want you to know that you are appreciated. And I hope everyone has enjoyed their stay here at the lodge at Gulf State Park. This is owned by the state of Alabama, specifically by the Department of Conservation, so we're very proud of it. Couple of quick notes. It is the world leader in hotels as far as things like energy efficiency and the LEEDS certification. It is a LEEDS Platinum certified facility, and that is unique, especially in the Hilton brand. So this is a model for other hospitality venues around the world. So we're very proud of that. As you have seen, as my Louisiana friend Patrick Banks pointed out, the lack of landscaping around the building is in order to generate a natural dune scenario, and so that has all grown in naturally. There is some interesting tidbits. The swimming pool, when you walked by, they've only filled the swimming pool one time in the history of this building, and they used the condensation from the air conditioners to refill the swimming pool. So they recirculate that water. The some of the design work of that you see on the outside of the building, the wooden slats is decorative, but it's also designed to reduce heat so that the building is much more energy efficient. You've seen the rain chains, the wood in the lobby. It was from the state of Alabama and done by artisans here in the state of Alabama. We're going to build another facility in North Alabama using all the lumber from big beams and things that are from the state of Alabama. So this is a very eco-friendly facility. And so again, thank you guys for your visit here. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dave Donaldson to give us some rules for the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before we get started, Keith Wilson on our staff contacted the city of Gulf Shores and got them to do a proclamation from the mayor's office, and I'd like for you and me to get a photo of that in front of the and Joe, do you have the logo? Yeah, there we go. But it essentially proclaiming congratulations to the commissions for their 75th annual meeting. So. So, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just going over our voting procedures for the commission. Voting at any meeting shall be by state commissioner with one vote from each for a total of 15 votes. In the event of dissenting votes, then each state delegation of the commission shall cast one vote determined by the majority of the delegation for a total of 5 votes. If only one commissioner from a given state is present, his or her vote shall represent that state. And upon request from any commissioner, recess shall be declared by the chairman for the purpose of allowing the state to caucus and determine their vote. So I will mention that we do have a quorum, so we are ready to proceed, sir.
All right. Thank you, Dave. And I did neglect to do introductions to go around the table. So I'm Scott Bannon, Director at Alabama Marine Resources. And I guess Dave will go your way.
I'm Dave Donaldson. I'm the Executive Director of the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission.
Jason Froba, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries.
Joe Spraggins, Executive Director with Mississippi Department of Marine Resources.
Reed Hendon, Citizens Rep, Mississippi.
Dan Eleanor, Florida Fish and Wildlife.
Jim Brown, Citizens Rep, Florida.
James Ballard, Fish and Wildlife Service.
Yep.
Doug Boyd, Texas.
Christopher Mace, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department.
Chris Nelson, Citizens Rep from Alabama.
And Steve, if you'll go through the staff.
Joe Farrer, GSMFC staff.
Cheryl Noble, GSMFC staff. Nancy Marcellus, Gulf States.
Greg Bray, Gulf State staff.
Steve Vanderkoy, Gulf State staff.
Patrick Banks, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries.
Ryan Montague, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries.
Bob Zales II, Executive Director of the Southeastern Fisheries Association.
Keith Wilson, IJF Staff Assistant.
Barry Thom, Executive Director of Pacific States Marine Fish Commission.
Charlie Robertson, Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission staff.
Rick Burris, Mississippi Department of Marine Resources.
Dalton Powell, Gulf State staff. Michael Brochard, Gulf State staff.
Donna Belay, Gulf State staff. Deanna Valentine, Gulf State staff.
Allie Wilhelm, Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission.
Angie Rabideau, Gulf State staff.
Thank you. I know the staff always appreciates that. So, so you have in front of you the agenda. I hope you've had a chance to review it. There is one modification I know is the Law Enforcement Committee did not meet, so we will not be getting a report from the Law Enforcement Committee. So does anybody have any other additions or subtractions? Dave?
So under other business, I'd like to talk a little bit about the fisherman training program. We received a letter from Ashford Rosenberg, and I distributed that, and just to talk about that a little bit.
Okay, anyone else have any changes? If not, I'll entertain a motion to accept the agenda.
Make a motion.
General Spraggins, a second.
Second.
By Chris Nelson. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? All right, the agenda has been adopted, and also you'll have the minutes from the previous meeting in front of you, or had some opportunity to review it. Does anyone have any amendments or additions or changes to the minutes? All right, I'll entertain a motion to adopt or approve the minutes.
So moved.
Mr. Hendon, second by Mr. Brown. Any discussion or any opposition? All right, so the minutes have been approved. And staff, I'm signing them now, so you don't have to track me down later. All right, so we'll start with the reports, but so who? So I guess we need to.
Let's just start with state federal.
All right.
Jason's here.
So Jason, let's go ahead and kick off with you as a state federal.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The State Federal Fisheries Management Committee met this morning. The committee has 4 committee motions to bring to the full commission. Discussion and final approval of Gulf Fin funding activities for 2025. Greg Bray outlined the status of 2025 Gulf Fin funding for data collection and management activities. Preliminary 2025 funding amounts for Gulf Fin and Rec Fin line items are based on the likelihood of receiving level funding. The proposed amount available for Fin new funding in 2025 totals $7.8 million. The total proposed spending for 2025 for all the high priority Gulf Fin jobs is $8.9 million, which would result in a significant deficit. After significant discussion regarding possible spending scenarios, the committee made the following motion. Bringing it up. The State Federal Fisheries Management Committee moved to approve the following Gulf Fin activities for 2025. Coordination and administration of Fin activities, collecting, managing, and disseminating marine recreational fisheries data, operation of Fin data management system, trip ticket program operations, Alabama snapper check implementation, and Southeast headboat port sampling, pending NOAA Fisheries Southeast Fisheries Science Center funding availability, and to forward this on to the full commission for their approval. The motion was passed unanimously.
So do we have a motion to approve?
Motion.
All right, General Spraggins, a second. Mr. Eleanor, so any discussion or questions about the motion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
All right. And so this motion did result in a funding deficit of 6.9%. The exact reduction amount is still uncertain. We're waiting on revised budgets from Alabama, and commission staff are exploring using Modernizing Recreational Fisheries Management Act underspending to offset the federal survey deficit. Gulf State staff will work with all program coordinators to obtain their revised budgets once funding deficit amounts are confirmed. The committee agreed that the deficit would be applied equally to all programs. Discussion of CMAP funding activities for 2025. The State Federal Fisheries Management Committee reviewed the various CMAP surveys along with their associated costs. The fiscal year 2025 expected CMAP appropriation is $6.725 million, and CMAP should receive approximately $6.38 million for fishery independent sampling for all 3 CMAP components. All 3 CMAP components based their fiscal year 2025 budget on level funding, and the total proposed for the Gulf was $2.787 million. After discussing, the committee made the following motion. The State Federal Fisheries Management Committee moved to accept the proposed funding for CMAP surveys for 2025 for a total budget of $2.78 million, and to forward this on to the full commission for their approval. The motion passed unanimously.
All right. We have a motion on the board. We have someone move to adopt.
Chris Mace moved to adopt.
Mr. Mason, second. By Mr. Hendon. Any discussion? Anyone opposed? Motion carries.
All right. Discussion and final approval of IJF state research funding for 2025. The committee received an update from Steve Vanderkoy on the Interjurisdictional Fisheries State Research Funding Program. Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission is making available $179,000 to $230,000 in new monies to each state based on need for work in 2025, and budgets have been received from each state. After discussion, the committee made the following motion. The State Federal Fisheries Management Committee moved to accept the proposed funding for IJF activities for 2025 for a total budget of $1.05 million, and to forward this on to the full commission for their approval. The motion passed unanimously.
All right, another motion on the board. Want to move to approve?
Move to approve.
Mr. Boyd, and a second.
I'll second. Chris Mace.
Mr. Mace. All right, any discussion? Any opposition? Motion carries.
All right, the Menhaden Advisory Committee report. The committee received an update from the MAC Sydney Alhale from NOAA Fisheries, provided a review of the 2024 Gulf season to date. Through September, the landings were 335,551 metric tons, which is a decrease of 15% from 2023 and an 18% decrease on the 5-year average. NOAA anticipates the year to end with 366,721 metric tons, which is still about a 15% reduction overall for 2024. The 2025 forecast is for the catch to be about 382,402 metric tons. The committee received a presentation from Dr. Amy Schuler of on the 2018 Gulf Menhaden benchmark for the Gulf of Mexico, CDAR 63, and the 2021 Gulf Menhaden update assessment, GDAR 03. Dr. Schuler stated that the Menhaden stock is healthy and should be in good shape for many years to come. The MAC forwarded the stock assessment report for Gulf Menhaden onto the State Federal Fisheries Management Committee for their approval. After discussion, the State Federal Fisheries Management Committee made the following motion. The State Federal Fisheries Management Committee moved to approve the stock assessment report for Gulf Menhaden and to forward this on to the full commission for their approval. The motion passed unanimously.
All right. Final motion, I think, on the table here. So we have a motion to approve. General Spraggins. Second by Mr. Boyd. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries.
The SOPs for the MAC were approved in 1992 and have never been updated. Steve Vanderkoy is going to provide the SOPs in a format that reflects the other commission SOPs over the next year. The MAC will review the revisions and potentially take action at the next October meeting. The MAC chair rotated back to industry, and Ben Landry was elected as chair, and Carrie Gelpy was elected vice chair through 2027. Proposed rules on HMS electronic reporting. Cliff Hutt provided an update on a proposed rule that would modernize and expand reporting requirements for HMS commercial limited access permits and commercial and for-hire open access permits by moving to electronic formats. The new reporting requirements would create consistency with NOAA fisheries efforts in other fisheries and augment data necessary for fishery management, and would help to reduce reporting burden through a single reporting system that meets the needs of multiple partners. Hutt described the preferred alternatives pertaining to vessel reporting and dealer reporting. The proposed rule published September 6, 2024, and the public comment period ends on January 6, 2025. NOAA fishery staff are holding 3 public webinars in 2024 to share details on the proposed rule and take comments. Inflation Reduction Act funding. Greg Bray provided an update on the IRA red snapper funding received by Gulf states. Currently, approximately $7.5 million has been received that is being used to make infrastructure improvements to state and commission data management systems, expanding the for-hire at sea observer project into Louisiana and Texas, and helping fund a 12-month benchmarking period for the transition to Alabama and Mississippi creel surveys. Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission is also working with NOAA Fisheries to acquire approximately $7 million in new monies to fund studies seeking new methods to improve recreational data collection surveys in 2 key areas of focus that were the focus of 2 workshops held in 2024. Our request for proposals has been published, and pre-proposals are due November 15th, with full proposals due January 15th, 2025. And finally, the election of officers. Louise Barbieri was nominated for the chairman, and Chris Mace was nominated for the vice chairman. The nominations were closed, and both were approved unanimously by the committee. Mr. Chairman, this concludes my report.
Thank you. And since, Nicole, we started early, so I'm not going to put you under the gun just yet if you need to take a few minutes. So I'd like to move to actually number 7, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Region 4 comments. James, you mind giving that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And yes, first of all, it's great to be back with everybody and have the opportunity to work with you guys again. Glenn and Alan send their condolences to wish they could have been here. They're both retiring in December, so this would have been their last meeting here. They both had prior commitments for this week, though. But they did want me to thank you all for the friendships and professional partnerships they've had over the years. They really enjoyed working with the commission. So, as you've heard before, budgets aren't that good. We're under CR right now through December 20th, and we are planning, preparing for a worst case scenario in hopes that it won't be that bad. But we already, we've reported in previous years, taken hits in our FWICO programs, and through this exercise of worst case scenario, those programs would take another hit. So we're still trying to figure that out, and those programs handle all of our habitat restoration and population assessment work. So hopefully the budget comes out and it's not as bad as our worst case scenario, but we're planning for that. We're currently working on a new strategic plan for the Fish and Aquatic Conservation Program. We're in the development stages of that. But we definitely want to get partner input on it. We want to incorporate partners' priorities into that plan and not just Fish and Wildlife Service. So if the commission is interested in reviewing that, once the plan's available, I can send it out to Dave for distribution for input. We did an assessment of all of our propagation programs to highlight our strengths and gaps in high priority captive conservation programs within the National Fish Hatchery System. All the results of that analysis are being synthesized and written into a manuscript that will be put out in peer review. But basically came out that our genetic management and recovery planning were both very strong, but there's room for improvement on our structuring restoration programs with our hatchery system. There's currently an interagency team working on developing the 2024-2026 version of the National Aquaculture Animal Health Plan and Standards. In the anticipation that'll be completed in early 25. The FAC recently drafted a plan to increase our investments in native fish conservation across multiple programs, including our hatcheries, habitat conservation assessment and monitoring, which is our FWICO offices, and our AIS program. And if the commission's interested, I can share that plan once it's ready for distribution, see where we're going to be trying to focus funding if we get any increases there. We were able to get some extra funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law to increase our efforts for fish passage projects. So we fully obligated the funds from FY22 and FY23 into projects and have obligated about 89% of the funds out of FY24. There will be one more round of funding under that piece of legislation for fish passes projects. It'll come out in the summer or early fall of 25. And that'll be the final one for that effort unless it's extended. FAC continues to make progress with the federal agency, with other federal agencies on revision of our interagency operational plan through the National Fish Habitat Partnership. We'll be submitting for approval to the agency leaderships in the coming months. There is a portion of that plan that catalogs all federal agency resource devoted to aquatic habitat conservation, and that's going to be made into an online access database where people can go and it's searchable and filterable and should be available by the end of this year. The Sportfish and Boating Partnership Council met in May of this year under a new charter. The council is now advises DOI through the Fish and Wildlife Service and Department of Commerce through the National Marine Fisheries Service under their new charter, and they'll be meeting again in person in the end of this month out in Montana to discuss progress to date and also actions as far as putting new members on their board. the Aquatic Animal Drug Approval Partnerships National Investigational New Animal Drug Program. That is a mouthful. Yeah. Yes, I know. It's much easier to say. Program continues to provide legal access to 19 different drugs that are going through the FDA approval process. In FY 23, 22.7 million fish were treated using drugs through that program. 75 different species. Through 898 studies conducted by partners, including states, tribes, academia, private industry, and federal agencies. And all the results of that go into the development of new animal drugs. And then under the bipartisan infrastructure law, we also got funding to implement there's a national framework for invasive species, the Early Detection Rapid Response Framework. And I'm coordinating the southeast component of that, which is a surveillance effort that is going to be, we're partnering with state of Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida currently on that effort. And that will be go out collecting, both using traditional sampling, expanding your state's regular sampling for invasives, and then incorporating eDNA work. Under the framework, we're also developing a network of molecular labs that will handle all of the capacity from the surveillance efforts. We're just one of the pilots. There's 5 more being stood up across the country. We were the first one. And there's a marker development team that's actively developing markers for that effort. And we're going to be starting off with markers that have been developed. They're just doing validation in the southeast to verify they work as expected and there's no inhibition in the samples. We currently have agreements with Georgia. Florida is working through a cooperation with USGS, who's my co-lead on that. And they're using the fish slam model that we've been doing. And I'm currently working with Auburn University to stand up Alabama's and have a call next week to see if Auburn will handle Mississippi's efforts as well as coordinating that. So that's all being stood up. And then the molecular, we do have there's 3 labs within the lab network that are being stood up, and we do have one in the southeast at the Conservation Genetics Lab at Auburn. Is going to be one of the lab networks within that overall framework. We were also able to get a line item for dealing with invasive plants up on Lake Gunnersville in Alabama. We're trying to address that problem. Right now we've asked the group that's handling the grant up there to look at putting together a 5-year plan. That was something that came from Senator Britt's staff, asking if we could kind of get a management plan on that. So we're working with them and hopefully get some research done with TVA and Mississippi State University to develop that management plan, looking at the overall way to control that. But we were able to get some extra funding out to some of our other states for invasive plant work. We funded 5 other states to look at new control measures for the plants that they're dealing with up there, and seeing if we can get any new tools to use up there. We also have some other, all the state plan grants come through us, so we're funding all those. Those are a little over $90,000 a year now. All of our states have one, except for Florida right now. So that's something that we have seen increases in funding. When it has come through for the program, it's come through in the state plan line. So if that's something that Florida's interested in, we definitely could help get that pulled together. And there's also part of the whole framework, there is a national aquatic eDNA strategy coming out, and they're meeting on ways to get that outreach for that program. There'll be an implementation plan being developed and is scheduled to be for public release later this year. And you probably all heard several years ago, I reported that there was an incident where moss balls were imported into the U.S. with zebra mussels in them. We had a response to that, a national response, and set up all new protocols for that specific moss ball, where it had to go through a permit process with USDA through inspections. But then in early August, the Fish and Wildlife Service and USDA were notified by Washington State that they received mothballs from a distribution that had zebra mussel shells in it. We turned that over to the USDA and law enforcement, and it was determined that the shipment of mothballs came into a distributor in Florida, and it found out through their investigation that the distributor was working directly with an exporter, and they shipped them through international post to get around the permit process and the inspection process. So that's being handled at headquarters of law enforcement and USDA. They've notified all the states, and they've done backtracking on all the shipment to notify the states that those shipments went to. So far, we haven't found any viable zebra mussels in that shipment, or any of the shipments that came from there, but it definitely highlighted another loophole in the system to where they need to try to close that off. And only other thing I got is under that's the framework. There is a rapid response fund, which you guys may have all heard about already. But there is $1 million set aside on that annually to do any rapid response for invasive species if you can identify one. They are looking for things that are high probability of success. So if you can get in, identify something, get it controlled quickly. The funding, the no-flows for those come out on a quarterly basis. So there'll be another one coming out this fall once all of the financial systems open back up from the year-end shutdown. So just keep an eye out for that. I try to ping all of your states anyway if they have any things they want to address with that funding. But it's a rare opportunity to have just a pot of money sitting there for doing rapid response for invasive species. So, Mr. Chairman, that ends my report.
Thank you, Mr. Ballard. An excellent report. A lot of stuff going on there. Anyone have any questions or discussion for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service? It is, it seems almost unusual to have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service at the the Fisheries Commission meeting, but the work you guys do is pretty amazing, and again, well recognized by the states, especially for all the invasives and things. So we do appreciate that. Nicole, are you ready for the hot seat? All right, so we're going to have the Technical Coordinating Committee report by Nicole Beckham.
The TCC met on October 16th, and there are 3 action items to be considered. Their meeting started with the general session focused on return 'em right, where several researchers presented on studies evaluating the effects of different release methods on survival of catch and released reef fish species in the Gulf. This was followed by updates from the Alabama at-Sea Observer Program and outreach and education efforts led by Florida Sea Grant. During the business portion of the meeting, the TCC was presented with an update highlighting the potential need for standardized genetic markers to modify hatchery-raised fish, and it was recognized that support would be needed from the 5 Gulf states. NOAA provided an update on the Deepwater Horizon Open Ocean Restoration Plan 4. The proposed plan focuses on restoring fish and water column invertebrates and sea turtles with approximately $210 million to support 12 potential projects alternatives over the next 15 years. BOEM presented updates on Gulf of Mexico projects, including hydrogen energy and wind energy projects. It was emphasized that although hydrogen is part of their authority, they are in the early stages of considering this as an energy source. A recent wind sale received no competitive interest, but ongoing efforts to lease new areas continue. Dave Donaldson brought up a recent discussion to add the U.S. Geological Survey as a formal TCC member, and a motion was made to add them. It was passed with no opposition. And the motion was the TCC moved to add the USGS as a formal member of the TCC.
Okay, we'll go ahead and dispense with the motion. So we have a motion on the board. Do we have a motion to adopt? By Mr. Brown, a second.
Second.
Mr. Mace, any discussion or questions? Any opposition? Motion carries.
Discussion continued where it was suggested that the TCC and its subcommittee coordinate to develop a list of research priorities for the commission to use to guide its actions moving forward. Resource monitoring capabilities were showcased for a drone that can transition between air and water. This autonomous drone has many applications and could be used to conduct surveys remotely in the air or water. The group heard an update of the use of the Inflation Reduction Act funding to enhance recreational fishing data systems, with workshops planned for 2025. An RFP was published and efforts are underway to develop centralized data systems at Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission, along with the expansion of the at-sea sampling programs in Louisiana and Texas starting in January of 2025. We heard updates on various SURF projects that are proposed based on need, totaling $1,530,750 for 2025. An overview of the gray snapper profile was provided and is nearing completion after experiencing delays from hurricanes and other issues. Review of the species profile led to discussions about using these task force to explore developing other types of useful products, such as fishery descriptions, that could help answer important questions. And there was a motion that the TCC add the deep drop fishery to the list of the Gulf States priorities for future profile development.
All right, motion on the board. We have some move to adopt. Mr. Hendon, we have a second. Well, Mr. Eleanor, okay, sorry. Any questions or discussion? Any opposition? Motion carries.
The Artificial Reef Subcommittee met and began with discussions about improving federal agency participation. Gulf states provided updates on their artificial reef activities, including addressing permitting challenges, advancing reef deployment, and continuing developments and monitoring efforts. The subcommittee reviewed studies comparing biodiversity at different reef sites and expressed interest in organizing a joint meeting with the Atlantic states in 2025. The Crab Subcommittee discussed Freedom of Information Act requests related to the diamondback terrapins, recreational crab licensing requirements, and limited sampling of the recreational blue crab catches. They also updated their standard operating procedures to reflect the current meeting schedule and election of officers protocols. There was a motion that the TCC Crab Subcommittee to approve the changes for the Crab Subcommittee standard operating procedure.
All right, another motion on the board and move to adopt. General Spraggins, a second. Mr. Boyd, any questions or discussion? Any opposition? Motion carries.
The Gulf Fin Subcommittee met and discussed updates on the Inflation Reduction Act funding, which were outlined above. NOAA provided updates on the EMRIT program, including efforts to track information requests and streamline data reviews. The committee also addressed issues with duplicate shrimp landing reports between Louisiana and Mississippi, epigenetic aging research for fish, and the development of the vessel system for commercial trip ticket reporting. The Mollusk and Shellfish Committee meeting covered state updates on oyster harvest, aquaculture, and restoration efforts. Discussions included oyster gardening programs, biosecurity measure for oyster larval transport, and restoration projects like culch planting and spat monitoring in multiple states. The CMAP subcommittee met and discussed state participation in the 2025 Reef Fish Survey and challenges with delayed maintenance for environmental sampling equipment. CMAP submitted a $4.78 million proposal to the NOAA Restore Science Program to enhance shrimp groundfish surveys with net mensuration equipment and acoustics to better estimate nectin biomass. The meeting concluded with the election of Nicole Beckham as chair and Rick Burris as vice chair.
All right, a lot going on in the TCCs. Anybody have any questions for Nicole? All right. I think we'll move on then to, thank you, Nicole, to
Thank you, Chairman.
number 5, Sea Grant Fisheries Extension Meeting Report. Dominique Siebert.
Sorry, this is my first time. So I'm the new Sea Grant chair. Laura Pecorello was the previous one, and she's now moved into the interim Texas Sea Grant director position. So my report is much longer than hers. And if you've been to any of the Sea Grant meetings, you know we go the whole time and then some. So I'll update each individual state program. Florida Sea Grant has an individual fishing quota pricing report database now, and so anyone can go online and see a quarterly snapshot of the Gulf of Mexico reef fish IFQ markets for fishermen and dealers in the fishery industry. It provides information on lease allocation, prices, and market conditions. In response to their new crab regs that reduced trap openings for the diamondback terrapins, Florida Sea Grant distributed 5,192 bird retrofit kits to recreational crabbers. They held their 3rd regional lionfish workshop with FWC. Anecdotal reports suggest lionfish densities are increasing in Florida, and eDNA sampling found lionfish DNA in the upper regions of Florida estuaries. The seafood markets and restaurants are hesitant to introduce lionfish business due to processing concerns, price points, and availability. Florida held their invasive fish roundup, having 192 fishers participate in collecting over 2,000 pounds of invasive fish. Florida Sea Grant used some of their carcasses collected to do a composting study and to see what levels of fish compost is used in different levels to see what the nitrogen and phosphorus levels could be. They also collected 198 samples during the rodeo to test for mercury and PFAs, looking at the safety of consuming stormwater pond fish. They have their 3rd year of the Great Goliath Harvest. They open it up with 200 available tags each year. In year 1, they only saw 26 tags filled and only 29 tags filled in year 2. Mostly were due to the restrictive slot limits. They opened up 200 again this year, and we don't know the reports back yet. Florida has their Living Shoreline Contractors course now available online, as well as the Marine Science Minutes and Voice of the Sea Talks. And their plastic-free restoration oyster shorelines is continuing with new sites, providing a 14-inch wave protection barrier with oyster shell. In Mississippi and Alabama, they wrapped up their depredation on descender device study, and out of 987 descending device drops, only 3 experienced depredation events. If you do math, it's like 0.003% of the descending devices are preyed upon, and all 3 of those were in Louisiana, unfortunately. So I think our sharks are just a little bit more aggressive. But ultimately, depredation on descender devices is very rare. They had their 4th year of their Fisheries course, which is Fishermen Invested in Science and Healthy Ecosystems. Around 75 people have completed the course with post-survey results showing a positive modification in their fishing techniques. They also created an oyster farm resiliency index, which is a self-assessment tool to assist industry members with preparing for disasters, as well as holding oyster community and practice workshops to increase community interest and receive direct feedback from the industry. This led to facilitated conversations between the state agencies and the industries. And they are in year 2 of their commercial oyster aquaculture sector training program, connecting interns with mentors and training them in the oyster aquaculture industry. Moving to Louisiana Sea Grant, they completed some of their navigating disaster aid fact sheets. These address federal disaster declarations and aid and how to apply. They're available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. They were released over the summer and have already been used across the Gulf and up the South Atlantic due to recent hurricanes. Louisiana Sea Grant is also working with LDAF for the Local Food for Schools Cooperative Agreement Program. This provides schools with fresh local shrimp and finfish in their school lunches, and this comes from their local Louisiana seafood processors. Louisiana Sea Grant has their seafood processing demonstration lab. It's the state's only seafood-focused facility. It's now open to the public for training, research, and demonstration purposes. And now a second facility is in the works. It's opening in Erath. That will be a production-level facility. Louisiana Sea Grant's Fisheries Seafood Leadership Program finished up its first year with 12 graduates, including commercial fishermen, processors, dock owners, congressional staffers, and fisheries. The next cohort will start in January 2025. Some research that Louisiana Sea Grant's doing is living shorelines, looking at hard structures versus nature-based solutions, as well as creating a habitat suitability index. And Louisiana Sea Grant researchers are looking at apple snail shell alternatives. Apple snails outcompete crawfish in their habitat. Crawfish farmers are removing the snails but don't know what to do with the shell, so they're looking at the apple snail composition and determining if it can be used in place of oyster shell for restoration purposes. Finally, in Texas Sea Grant, their Weighmaster training program has certified about 75 new Weighmasters for fishing tournaments. The program is now available online. They're also developing a fishing tournament and advisory board to create best practices and streamline operations. They completed the marine debris prevention grant with their recreational fisheries. They enhanced the monofilament recycling program. They are creating a statewide location map, and all 300 of their marine debris fishing kits have been distributed to guides and anglers. Texas Sea Grant is also working on creating the Texas Seafood Trail, providing a list for consumers of restaurants and grocery stores that serve local seafood. In their oyster aquaculture, they currently have 11 active aquaculture farms with 23 requests in the queue and 1 hatchery. However, their wild population of oysters in Galveston Bay is experiencing large freshwater influxes, virtually killing off most of their oyster population. When their oyster season opens in November 1st, Galveston Bay will remain closed, and they are working on trying to get a fisheries disaster declaration. Texas Parks and Wildlife, in lieu of this, has created an oyster task force to address their oyster issues. Texas and Louisiana Sea Grant's Better Bird Project is continuing, with flapless heads being the most efficient at reducing bycatch, and bird versus bird comparisons are being conducted with onboard researchers. The Gulf Commercial Fisheries Program completed its pilot phase with Texas Sea Grant and trained 5 commercial reef fish deckhands. Right out the gate, 2 of the 5 were hired. This program is with the Gulf of Mexico Reef Fish Shareholders Alliance, with the next training class hopefully taking place in Florida. And finally, the Gulf of Mexico shrimp fishery has officially received its Responsible Fisheries Management certification. This was 16 years in the making and can provide benefits to market access and stability. And that's it.
All right, thank you for that report. Anybody have any questions? All right. Dave?
Thank you, Dominique. You mentioned the Florida IFQ.
Mm-hmm.
So is that on their website? And
yes, it's on the Florida Sea Grant website, and it's a quarterly report.
And it tracks available IFQ shares or what?
Lease allocations, their prices, they survey the fishermen and what they have and what's available and what they have to spend money on.
Interesting. Thanks.
All right, we all appreciate the partnerships with the Sea Grant, so a lot of good stuff there, so thank you for that report. And then, number 6 is the NOAA Fisheries Southeast Regional Office comments. So we don't have anyone here from NOAA, but the report is in the briefing book if anyone wants to review that. And so now we already had James. So number 8, the NOAA Fisheries Budget Update by Mr. Donaldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will refer you to tab C for the House and tab D for the Senate. Both House and Senate have introduced bills for FY25. On the House side, House was not as good as the Senate. They recommended $865 million, which is about almost 250 million below the last year's enacted. So that's not good news. For the fisheries data collection, survey, and assessments, there was a small decrease, it was about 205 million, which is a small decrease from last year. For the fins, it says no less than 26 million, which was the same level for last year. Fisheries Service they had language in there recommending support for the Southeast Area Monitoring Assessment existing programs. They had information about the state management of marine fisheries, that 30 million that NIMS, the Gulf states and South Atlantic states collaborate to develop and improve state recreational harvest data to either supplement or supplant MRIP, and this should be a top priority of NOAA. The Gulf of Mexico Shrimp Effort Project that provides $850K for implementing the new ELB program, and although the commission is not directly mentioned in that language, the commission has been involved in the early adopter program and may be involved in future endeavors with that. There is the Gulf of Mexico fish species program where NIPS is encouraged to work with the Gulf Commission and allocates $5 million to establish a partnership with the commission to provide grants to academic partners to conduct fishery independent research for IGF species. Aquaculture in the House was at 19 million, which is 5 million below last year. The councils and the commission line item it has a small increase of 44.3 million, which is a small increase from last year. IGF grants that go to the states was level funded, and enforcement had about a $14 million decrease from last year. So that's the bad news. The good news is that on the House side, they recommended a $1.16 billion budget for NOAA fisheries, which is 43 million above the enacted. It's very similar language for the fins and the fisheries fishery surveys and whatnot. For fishery service, they had a $15 million increase to ensure historical survey coverage. CMAP and the bottom long line and trawl surveys were specifically mentioned in the language. So this is the second year that's been in there. So hopefully that will be a reoccurring thing, and CMAP will continue to realize that increase in funding. While it's named differently in the House than the Senate, it's the Gulf of Mexico Fisheries Research, which is the $5 million to establish a partnership with the Commission to do grants for fishery independent work. the fins were at level funding from last year, but there is a specific mention about Gulf Fin and the importance of collecting biosamples and providing funding for that. Unfortunately, they didn't specifically allocate funds for it, but they did mention it. Then the Gulf of Mexico shrimping effort, the $850K for the new ELB program. There is information, or there's information about for-hire electronic reporting using ELBs for the federal charter boat in the Gulf of Mexico. They allocate 1.5 to continue supporting and developing or implementing that program. Aquaculture saw a slight increase of about $1 million, and there's some language in there about oyster aquaculture and research and restoration. Same funding level as last year to support ongoing research. We saw about a $2 million increase in the council and commission lines. The president budget proposed to reduce or eliminate the fishery independent. Jeez Louise, man, having a hard time. I shouldn't have the pie. The interjurisdictional fisheries grants, they proposed to eliminate those, and they actually they rejected that proposition and provided $4 million, which is about a 600K increase, and then law enforcement was level funded from last year, but they did have language in there about 1.5 million to support continued enforcement of the ELB. So we're still early in the budget process. Because the numbers are very different. It'll have to go to an omnibus, and with it being an election year, I'm not sure when we're gonna actually see a budget, but when the House first came out, it was very doom and gloom, but the Senate it was a little rosier picture. So hopefully we won't see any major cuts, but time will tell. So I will answer any questions.
I thought you just said you didn't have any answers, and then you asked for questions about the budget.
I can pretend.
Yeah. All right, any other questions on that? If not, we're going to continue on with the Dave Donaldson show and have a legislative update.
So in your briefing book, I've got some updates on several pending legislation. The first is HR 5103, which is the Fisheries Act. That's in tab E. The House Natural Resource Committee has marked up the bill last month. Senator Rick Scott from Florida actually introduced a Senate companion bill of the Fisheries Act, and that's been referred to the Senate Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation for their consideration. And you'll recall that we have sent a letter of support. This bill helps streamline the process of getting the money out when a federal fisheries disaster is declared, getting it out in a more timely manner. I have to say that the Fisheries Act is. I think there's certain people up on the Hill that come up with acronyms, and this one was exceptionally crafted. Because it's called Fishes, but the full name is the Fisheries Improvement to Streamline Untimely Regulatory Hurdles for Post-Emergency Situation Act. So they thought long and hard about that one, so I was impressed with that. The other bill in the House is House Bill 8707. It's the Fisheries Data Modernization Accuracy Act. It's to reform NOAA Fisheries MRIP program. It provides more of a regional approach and incorporates the state surveys in their data. With Representative Graves leaving, I'm not sure where this bill's going. It's probably not gonna move forward since he's no longer gonna be in the House of Representatives. A bill that hasn't been introduced yet is the Protect American Fisheries Act. This allows for economic causes such as market manipulation by foreign entities as an allowable reason to declare a federal fisheries disaster. This is in direct response to the shrimp import issue. I have expressed to Representative Mays from South Carolina. She introduced that bill, and I've expressed both the Gulf states and the Commission are supportive of this bill. But as I mentioned, it's very early. It hasn't actually even been introduced, or introduced to any of the committees. So, and the last is a Senate bill, Senate 4113, the State Boating Act, and it allows states to attach fees for recreational fishing access and ecological restoration programs to the boating registration process. The bill has been referred to the Committee on Commerce, Science, and Transportation, and the issue is this process is currently being blocked by the Coast Guard, and it's not because the Coast Guard is against the states being able to collect these fees, but apparently there was a long-standing regulation on the books that previous Coast Guard administrations didn't really enforce, but the new commandant of the Coast Guard saw it and says, hey, we need to follow the letter of the law. So this particular bill addresses that. The state of Louisiana has provided me as well as the senator a letter of support, and in that letter they urged the commission to write a similar letter. Both the Atlantic Commission as well as the Pacific Commission are in support of this bill, and if it pleases the committee, I will, or the commission, I will draft up a letter that talking with the various states. So, I think Florida and Texas have no issue with it because it's not something that affects them. But I know Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama would be supportive of this because it would allow them to collect these fees. So I will ask for guidance from the commission if I should proceed with the letter.
So any comments about drafting the letter? Chris? You just looked ready. Get to the starting line. General Spraggins?
Yeah, I think it would be a good thing for it if we could draft a letter from Mr. Donaldson coming from the Gulf states to state that this is something that we're supporting, so I'd appreciate it.
I can do that. And I will say from Alabama's perspective, we would support that. We've tried to create the same challenge a lot of states have is derelict vessels, and so we were trying to collect some fees via the boater registration, and we ran into that roadblock, so that would help clear that up, and we would be very supportive of that. Is there? Do we need a motion for that, or just general support from?
I think if you just give me that direction, I will proceed.
All right. So I didn't see any like frowny faces around the room. Well, Dan's always got a frowny face. So that doesn't count. So the commission would like, or the committee would like to direct then that Mr. Donaldson please write a letter of support for the State Boating Act. And General.
Yeah, and just one thing, GOMA did do get some funding to be able to help with derelict vessels. And they was part of that NOAA gave them about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and I think that it was split up between several states there. I think all the 5 Gulf states was part of it, but it's definitely not enough to complete what we need. And so anything that we could continue to get more would definitely help. And I mean, just to give you an idea, Mississippi's moved 153.
All right, so Mr. Donaldson, do you have anything else on your long list of?
No, that concludes the legislative update.
All right, since we are post-lunch, I think we're scheduled to take a break. I think we go ahead and take, let's see, what is it? It's about 2:10. Take, you need 10 minutes work or 15, you think? 10? Let's do 10 minutes, come back at 2:20. Hey, real quickly, before the break is officially over, they just brought the cookies out, so we'll extend it by 37 seconds. All right, if everybody can kind of start making their way back, we have the continuation of the Dave Donaldson Show in just a minute. All right, since we have most of the commissioners back, we're going to go ahead with number 10, update on the future of seafood industry in the Gulf of Mexico. We're going to start out with the Southeast Shrimp Strategy and Planning Meeting. Since Jeff is not here, Mr. Donaldson's going to take that.
Yep, it's Dave 3.0. So in your briefing book in tab I, there's a summary, but you'll recall that last October the commission directed staff to begin working with NIMS and Sea Grant to explore and examine the future of the seafood industries and looking at the challenges that they're faced. So we worked with several of the Sea Grant offices and hosted a Southeast Shrimp Strategy and Planning meeting in end of April, first of May this year. We had about 60 participants from all over the southeast, and was a good mix of harvester, processors, docks and buyers and state and federal agencies, as well as Sea Grant. And I thought it was a very productive meeting. And later in May, Florida came out with their Florida Commercial Fishing Summit, and Dan's going to talk about that a little bit. But Jeff did go attend that, and John Walter with NOAA Fisheries approached us about working in as partners on this on the shrimp futures project. The problem with all these projects is we're working on limited funding, but there are important issues, and it's we're doing our best to try and address those. But the shrimp futures is we're still in the discussion phases, but ultimately they're going to conduct a series of workshops, and we'll be involved in putting those setting up the logistics of those workshops. But there, as I mentioned, there's a little more detail in the briefing book. Jeff unfortunately is not here, but he could provide a little more information. But that's just kind of a quick overview of those two projects, and I'll answer any questions if I can.
All right. If we don't have anything for Dave, then we'll move on to the Future Florida Fisheries Commercial Fishing Industry Summit. Dan, Eleanor.
Yeah, so as discussed last October, I was kind of brought this up, and we were looking at the future of commercial fishing in 5 to 10 years, because the industry, it's going to change, and these guys need a little bit of help. So we held our first annual summit, commercial fishery summit, with the help of industry. We had it in May of 21 and 22 in St. Augustine, and we had over 100 participants, so it was well attended. Had fishermen, dealers, and other agency representatives there. We had some representatives and some of their aides come as well. Participants engaged in discussions to identify barriers and create a vision for Florida's commercial fisheries over the next 5 to 10 years. Some of the top issues identified were imports impacting market, impact of recreational sector, lack of working waterfronts, inaccurate recreational data, water quality, lack of Florida sustainability certification, consumer awareness of Florida's products versus imports, fisheries included from Farm Bill, USDA relief, lack of seafood labeling, and barriers for new participants in the industry. So some of the next steps that we'll take, and Bob's here and he's going to talk a little bit about what his vision is on his next steps, but Bob was a big component to the industry summit, and I really appreciate all his efforts and getting all his folks there. So we're considering having future summits and based on participants' interest, and then we'll have ongoing meetings with industry representatives to advance discussion on some of these topics, see if we can find solutions. But that's pretty much what we did. I was excited to have it. It was the first of its kind in Florida. I think we're making some progress. We have a long way to go. The hurricanes naturally didn't help. It's kind of sad, especially after I think it was Ian moved through Fort Myers. All the shrimp industry, we had some big docks there, and people are just coming in and buying property left and right. So we're losing working waterfront all the time. These other storms, and I think there's some fatigue with these storms, and I think people are starting to give in a little bit, but they're so resilient, I think they'll start to rebuild, and everything will be getting back the way it should be. But that's kind of my report on that.
Any questions or comments for Dan? Yeah, I know the industry is facing just unreal challenges. We're not seeing future generations move up into this, and Bob may mention that. And working waterfront in Alabama, we're dedicated to try and make sure that we maintain areas for that. And I appreciate General Spraggins made a comment the other day that he's been going around talking to restaurants and basically just calling them out. If you're a local independent restaurant and you're not selling, wild caught seafood from the Gulf or from at least U.S. caught, you're always going to have imports. But so, General, I applaud you on that. So I think next we have Bob Zales going to provide a little update on the region-wide industry summit. And Bob, if it's easier, I don't know how long you're going to be if you need to sit down to. I know during karaoke you're used to swaying with the microphone, but if you can just.
Bob Zales second. Thank y'all for having me here. And going along with what Dan talked, the summit that we put together last May, in my mind was very successful. It was very innovative. It was first of its kind in Florida. We were able to bring over 100 of the commercial seafood industry people in the state of Florida together in one place to talk about what vision is for the future, the different issues that we have with what's going on in the industry today. And when I say the industry, I'm talking everything from people who do oysters, shrimp, flounder to reef fish, kingfish, HMS species, restaurants, processors, the people that deliver the seafood. Those are all members of SFA. And so we represent a wide group of people who basically is the industry itself. So for the first time, we brought everybody together, and it was very good. And since then, there's been several of us, different organizations that we're having talks about trying to move forward with some of these issues. The program was sent to y'all, and you see 10 issues that were identified as the critical issues as what's wrong with our industry today. Because when you look, and Dan and his people produce this, when you look at the seafood industry in the state of Florida, it's going steadily downhill. And that's pretty much representative of the seafood industry in this country. When you look everywhere, I mean, all you got to do is look at shrimpers, right? And everybody else. We're all going away. And when we go away and nobody's coming back in to take over the seafood that consumers and that you're eating in restaurants and everywhere else is all going to be imported. It's all going to be junk. And so we're trying to get everything together. So the reason why I'm here is to try to build on what we did in Florida on a Gulf-wide basis to see if there's somehow we can get the commission to support either by a loan or by involving Sea Grant or whoever we need to involve to try to have develop a Gulf-wide summit similar to what we did in Florida to try to bring the Gulf industry together, because what happens with this is that everything stems on what happens in DC, right, with legislation. So when you have fragmented people out here trying to go after different issues, you don't get anything done. You get the whole group together to go for the few issues that benefit everybody. You're a lot more successful. You get a lot more going on. So that's basically why I'm here, is to try to build on what we did in the state of Florida on a Gulf-wide basis.
Right, Jason.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, so Louisiana's been doing fishery summits for the commercial industry, I don't know, probably back to 2010, 2011, maybe at least 10 years. And we started out doing them annually. And we picked different areas of the state. Attendance was pretty low compared to our expectations, I guess, to the point where we backed off and we started doing them every other year. Because we felt like we weren't getting, there wasn't enough new information to get people in. But I'll say we had a hard time getting people to drive an hour or 2 hours from their home base to wherever the meeting was. To get them to participate, we had to get as close to them as possible. So in this scenario, if we're doing a region-wide summit, there'd have to be some big draw or something to get these folks to travel, or you might just get the bigger operations is where I'm going with that. If there's not a lot there to get them there, but I think I like the idea. I think in practice it's going to be a challenge to get the word out and get people interested and get them to show up. If you're talking about going from one state to another state, we can't get them to go from one down to another town.
And I appreciate that, and for those of y'all that don't know me, you know, I've been involved in this game now for over 30 years, dealing with Gulf States and the Fisheries Service and everybody else. And I'm sure y'all have heard of what we did several years ago. We created this United We Fish thing that we all went to DC. We brought people together from across the country, from Alaska to Maine and everybody else. We had a large crowd to really work on letting the legislators in D.C. know who the seafood industry was, and it was pretty good success. And so it kind of slowed down and went away. But clearly, like you're talking about in the Gulf, in the meetings that I've attended off and on through the Gulf of Mexico, when you're including all states from Texas through Florida, you look at a central location, and typically New Orleans has been that central location. And you clearly, we have to be in touch with these seafood dealers, which we're in the process of gathering the different seafood producers and the different people that are involved here to get a list of people to notify, to let them know what happens. And clearly, I think things are a little different today in the atmosphere that we're living, because a lot of this has to do with the import issues with the shrimpers and how the shrimping industry is just completely falling apart because of the imports and everything. And Louisiana, y'all know this far too well, and Alabama too, with Chris and his people. So it's something that we think now is a good time to try to get people together, because people are searching for ways to survive, because that's what it's all about now. You've got all these small fishing families that are going away, and if we don't continue them, and you got the historical perspective, right? I mean, you look at the shrimp industry by itself, look at the history of that shrimp industry, that if it goes away, that you've lost. And so there's so many issues that need to be done to keep the industry viable and keep it productive and hopefully grow into the future. You got working waterfronts, you've got the various regulations that are out there, you've got recreational issues right now with the discards and discard mortality that's being worked on. Clearly now has been identified as that is a big issue with fish stocks that are out there, that's really taking the stocks down and affecting the quotas and affecting everything that's there. And all this needs to be worked on and identified. And when you bring all these people together, hopefully you get a strong voice to be active and improve things.
Yeah, I agree with you, Bob, and with Jason, it's hard to get those groups together, but if you don't start, it doesn't happen. I know we talked in a meeting the other day, even among the recreational community, talking about like the use of descenders and different things to help with the discard mortalities. Apathy is the biggest challenge, and I know, and Chris could probably testify to this, that a lot of people get that thought, well, one, they'll never change. You know, no matter what I say, they'll never change, and that's not true. I think we know that. You, as you mentioned, the unified voice helps make change, and people don't feel like like they're being heard, and we need to change that yes, we want them to be heard. And I know a lot of Alabama legislators have been very supportive. You know, they changed the labeling rules. They've been working on some other things to support commercial fishing. So is there, Dave, I'll throw this to you, is there a way the commission can help support a summit, or is there what kind of discussions do we need to have? Is it advertising, or what kind of support we might be able to?
So as I mentioned early on, that the biggest issue is having dedicated resources to do it. I mean, Jeff and Laura and Texas Sea Grant and Louisiana Sea Grant, you know, we're all willing. It's just it's scraping together the funds to pay for the people to come. I have a question for you, Jason. For your summits, were you paying for them to attend?
No, we weren't paying for them to attend, but we fed them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and even if you don't pay their travel, you've got the meeting costs and whatnot. So to me, that's the biggest hurdle in doing something like this, is trying to find some dedicated resources and to be able to do it. But I think it's, as people have mentioned, I think it's an important issue, and we've got to do something. but, it's certainly an uphill battle, but, I can certainly task Jeff with looking at different, opportunities to put something like this together, so.
If I could
Go-
real
go
quick, the Florida Summit, FWC supplied some of the funding for the hotel venue, the whole bid in for different things that were there. Industry people, we donated for different things to help with the thing as far as socials and as far as different things that went along with it. So it's a combination of everybody kind of worked together on this thing. So, as far as travel and things like that, that was all on our dime. We paid our own travel and whatnot. Hotel room, we paid our own hotel room. We got a good rate because of what they were able to do with the hotel. So, it's kind of like a meeting that y'all put together, or council, whoever, you have that there, but you have to involve people with it to get it done. And clearly, if you don't start somewhere, it ain't gonna happen. So that's the reason why I'm trying to advocate for this. And, if we can work towards this, then we look for funding from different sources for people to participate and help move this thing forward to let it go. It may be successful like it was in Florida, Gulf wide. Hopefully it would be. It may fall apart, and if it does, you just don't do it again. But if it works, then you try to continue it on and you see what can be done for it.
Well, and to that point, Bob, with the shrimp meeting we did in Baton Rouge, we actually provided travel funds for majority of people to come, and that's why I was thinking. But I mean, if you think that we can not do that, or at least minimize that, then that makes it a little easier, because I mean, travels can get fairly expensive. So.
Yeah, and and I'll go back to United We Fish. You had people from Alaska paid their own travel and everything to DC. Everybody that went to DC for the United Fish thing that we put on, it was all personal travel that was there. There were no sponsorships at all. We were able to get the venue and you're familiar with the DC background, right there by the Senate offices. You had that big park, right? We had that park loaded up with people from up near the White House all the way to Union Station. That's how many people were there. They all footed their own bill. So if the purpose and the need is great enough, I think that people will pay what they need to do to try to look and try to protect their future.
General Spraggins and then Mr. Hendon.
Yeah, I think you may have answered some of my questions in because one of it was going to be, what are we looking at? How much money? And is there a way that we can go out and try to help raise this money and do what we need to do? So if obviously with what you said there, Bob, about possibility of not having to pay for travel, that might make it a lot different. But I mean, if you'll let us know, we can try to come up with some different ways to help raise some money too to go to it.
So in terms of the date, did y'all look around the different seasons for when y'all selected that date of May? And then was there anything, y'all have a lot of potential solutions I see y'all came up. Was there anything immediately actionable that came out of that y'all hadn't thought of? It was kind of a surprise, like, well, we can do this right now, or is all of this kind of longer term?
I think it's all a work in progress. I mean, I don't think anything surprising came out of it. I think the biggest thing was trying to get recruitment of new fishermen. And I think the biggest problem is working waterfronts, imports. I think all that whole list, there's a lot of issues in there. If it wasn't for Bob and these guys, I reached out to all our associations and asked for money, to be honest with you. I mean, they fronted a brunt of the bill. Now, I can pay for some things with my budget, which I don't mind doing. But if it wasn't for industry like Bob and Off and some other folks and the Florida Stone Crab Association, I could go on and on. Those guys contributed and that helped me put on the event. And I'm going to have to do that again if I go have another Florida event. But with that kind of participation and that kind of help, I mean, it was easy to do. I counted on them to recruit the fishermen to bring them. And they did that, but I counted on them also to help with the funding as well. So it was a big help to have that.
If I could, and part of what this is that you know, for industry being fragmented like it is, there was no way the logistics could be done. So that's why FWC provided the logistics and the venues and putting that, and that's what I'm kind of coming to y'all about, to see if y'all can do something similar to put the basics down there, and then we'll all work together, hopefully, all work together to then to bring everybody into the venue and then see what the success is. Because what I saw that was there, even though pretty much everybody talks about the stuff that was on the list that's there, it never was done in a venue where everybody pretty much agreed, yeah, this is affecting everybody. And that's the key, because I don't care if you're a rec person, for hire person, commercial person, everybody has differences, right? Within each organization, within each industry, commercial, they all have issues against each other. For hire, same way. Private recs, the same way. But what we try to do is there are core issues that affect everybody universally. I mean, you've got all the regulatory impacts, you've got Coast Guard impacts, you've got just a host of impacts that affect everybody on the water in some fashion. And if you can develop a core part of that, you know, 4 or 5 or 6 issues that everybody can agree to, that, yeah, this affects me, and work on those to try to help everybody with those. Then hopefully if you're successful there, then you can move on to the other part of it, to where disagreements have been there, to try to lessen those disagreements and bring more people together, working together for the common cause.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I feel compelled to weigh in as a commercial fishing person in the seafood business. And, you know, my thoughts are along the lines of the Lyle Simpson Award winner, Gary Graham, the other night, in recognizing what he was able to do for the Gulf shrimp industry and the Gulf and South Atlantic shrimp industry in conjunction with Dave Harrington. And it was, you know, technological advancement, as simple as it was. And we just don't have any of that, and haven't in years, for fisheries in a significant way to make catch fisheries particularly more competitive in the world seafood market, because this is a worldwide market. It's difficult to break it down and say, you know, the local seafood market, because it's all impacted by the worldwide supply of seafood in its various forms. And, you know, every time I look at what projects are being funded, they are to respond to a regulatory challenge to reduce the impact on either another stock of fish or a protected species or marine mammal. And I don't know the last time I saw something that enhanced the ability of a fishing production platform to produce its product more efficiently. I mean, I'm going to pick on Scott, because I've tooted his horn so much on how he manages in the state, not Scott. The state manages our catch fishery for oysters. It's brilliant. But if you look at it from an economic standpoint, it's the stupidest thing in the world, because we try to get as many people involved in it as possible and produce them the least efficient way to spread the impact out over the most people. If we did agriculture that way, we'd all be buying $50 bread loaves, because you'd be harvesting wheat with scissors or something. I don't know. And I just, you know, it's just a fact, folks. It's just economics. And as cold-hearted as that sound, and I'm somebody that my grandfather was an oyster catcher, and, you know, his father was an oyster planter. It's not like I'm coming at this with someone who doesn't have an appreciation for what fisheries and fishermen and fisher people, whatever the politically correct term is, do. But at some point, you've got to look at the cold, hard economic facts of what does it take to stay in business. And just fighting a rearguard action against, you know, regulatory impacts and You know, can I get some fisheries disaster relief because otherwise I'm going to go out of business? That's not what builds business, and that's not what, you know, if you're not growing, you're dying, and the seafood industry is not growing. It is in certain areas where it's economically very positive and where you can compete for the kids that want a job that pays six figures. When I was a kid, the shrimp boat captains earned the same amount in a year that an airline pilot did. Think about it. So there were plenty, and you didn't have to have near the education that an airline pilot did. You just, I mean, different kind of education, excuse me. You have plenty of education, but you didn't have to go to airline pilot school. You went to school with your daddy on the shrimp boat. But those days are over. In the shrimp business, we had 80, you know, here's my cry and tell. We had 80 boats at my dock when I came out of high school. We've got this many there now, zero, big fat zero. We've got a dock that's in poor repair, and Scott's being bugged all the time when you're going to get them Nelsons to clean that dock up. So it is a tough situation, but my point is, what is my point? Is to say that all of us collectively as fishery managers, if we want to help the people, what we're actually managing is people. If we want to help the people, we've got to start looking at it from an economic standpoint and a let's help them improve their competitiveness standpoint. And I just don't think we do that enough. And I hope that some of these summits we have, instead of, yeah, we can stand around and complain about imports. What are you going to do? Marketing would really help. And we had a great marketing initiative in the Gulf. And I would love to see more effort put into that to point out the attributes of a wild caught or domestic raised whatever product versus an imported product. But that's only going to get you so far. You can't have a $100 pound of fish versus a $1 pound of fish. And it's almost getting there. People are just not going to pay that much of a premium for a local. I don't know where that steak came from that we ate at lunch, but it was excellent. It might have been an Argentine beef. I don't know. Okay, I'll quit rambling, but let's look at the economics. And Bob, I appreciate what you're doing. It's almost pushing a rock up a very steep hill, and at the end of the day, you probably got to go back and push it up the same hill. And I appreciate you being here.
All right, so Dave, you have any final comments?
Well, I think that based on the comments, this is something that's worth pursuing. When I get back to the office, I'll talk with Jeff, and I think touch base with you, Bob, and also talk with you, Chris, because I think that there's some potential, and I don't remember who said it early on, but if we don't do anything, it's certainly not going to change. So let's try and do something. It's tough work pushing that rock up the hill, but I think it's worthy work. So we'll do our best to put something together that's worthwhile. And Larry was a big proponent, and I am as well. I don't want to have a meeting just to have a dang meeting. I mean, we all sit around these rooms enough, and I want to make sure that if we do this, we do it right, and we come up with some tangible results that hopefully moves that rock up the hill and keeps it up that hill. So that's what we'll do.
Quick. Number one, we're not looking at trying to set this up next month, right?
Right.
So sometime next year would be good. It may be at the end of the spring or middle of summer, somewhere around in there to do that. The other part of it is when you're trying to get things done. That's the reason why one of the results of this meeting in May several of us now, we're having conference calls. We've got one scheduled in a couple of weeks. We've had some others to look at the issues that are there, to pick out the top 2 or 3 to go to the commission with, to try to get them to support, right? So there's a goal to try to get some things done and be productive as to what happened to that, from that meeting. Because if you don't get anything produced out of the meeting, it's not worth having. So that's what we're trying to do, and that's what the whole thing here with trying to do something Gulf-wide. We think that would just benefit everybody in the industry, whether you're serving the fish or whether you have a restaurant doing, whether you're processing, catching, doesn't matter. If you're fishing, then you benefit from it.
Mr. Brown, you had a final comment?
Yeah, just gonna ask Dan if you could give us an example of, you had a little over 100 participants, sound like industry pitched in a lot. What did that cost the state then to run that meeting roughly? I know you probably don't have all the figures together.
Roughly just, I'd say 10 grand just from the state, and then another 15, 16 from industry. So, it's a relatively small meeting, but, we did a lot within those couple of days. But the hotels are definitely going to be your most expensive things.
But in this case,
naturally,
people paid their own travel.
yeah, people paid their own travel. We just got a good rate. Industry paid for, like Bob said, a lot of the socials and the food and everything else. So that's huge when you got that component of it, because that takes a lot of the expense. Because naturally, you guys know, and Nancy knows how much it is to put this venue on right here. Going right next door right there, that dinner alone right there will deflate your budget in a heartbeat. So it's tough. So, you got to think about different arenas that you can do things in. You could do this and you could do it the right way, and it doesn't have to be overly expensive, but you're going to have to rely on industry to help you out. And that could be Gulf-wide.
Bob, thanks for that. I think we all, and it's a good start that you'll communicate with the staff, and I think you'll see some progress on that. And I think the general and I can speak for our 2 states, just like he spoke earlier, that we probably have a little bit we can put toward that with our seafood marketing and some different things. So I guess we'll move on to our next. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Bob.
Aren't you glad you sat down now? Update on the commission's USGS partnerships. I guess, Steve, you're going to give that report or start, and then Dave will fill in the gap.
Yes, sir. If you turn to, in your briefing book, tab J, quick background, I provided a little write-up of sort of where we've been, how we arrived here, and then also the abstracts from the talks that we gave at the National AFS a few weeks ago. If you recall, in 2022, the October meeting, the USGS came with the intention of engaging us as the commission to start to see where we could maybe potentially work together in the marine environment. They have the ability to do quite a bit of just basic science that could contribute to what we do in management. They have the ability, the people, and can help us in some of the environments that they are already dabbling in. The commission told us to go ahead and start looking into that, potentially working together with USGS, and through that, the staff at the commission, Charlie and I, got with the USGS office, the Wetlands and Aquatic Research Center, which is in Gainesville, and began talking with their staff. What are some of the similar things that we could work on? Freshwater issues, oysters, estuarine issues. One of the things that came up was telemetry. Seemed to be a common issue. They were working with telemetry of sea turtles as well as sturgeon and some other species, and we were beginning to try to help move some things, move the needle a little bit on things like triple tail, and had an interest in cobia. And there's been a big interest in where have cobia been going. It's at the council level, it's at the state level. So that became sort of our bailing wick initially of the project that we could possibly work together. USGS was very interested in collaborating. They had some funds. So they submitted a proposal for a project. It did not get funded through USGS, but USGS found some funds at the end of the year, some carryover money to seed a pilot. Out of that, we began leveraging a little bit of commission money that we had and began tagging acoustically and satellite tags cobia in the eastern Gulf off of Florida, and then also up here off the Panhandle. That project involved the USGS, the commission staff, Mississippi DMR staff, as well as FWC staff. This past spring, we went out and actually deployed 20, I believe it's 28 tags off of Naples in February, and USGS deployed another 11 off of the Okaloosa Pier in July. DMR is doing some separate tagging, satellite tagging on their own. And again, we're doing these acoustically and satellite tags and an external dart tag. So they're actually triple tagged fish. Just to kind of begin to work out some of the details and logistics of how would this be as a viable project. Through that, the word got out to the other regions. They contacted us and the other commissions, so the 3 marine commissions in the Great Lakes, to begin to work together to facilitate a bigger, more formal cooperative arrangement, similar to what they're doing with the other commissions individually. Out of this, a steering committee was formed, and we put together a special symposium session at the National AFS meeting, which occurred a few weeks ago. And after that, also had a separate session just for USGS staff and the 4 commissions to get together to talk about how could we do more to make use of what opportunities USGS can offer to conduct just basic unbiased science that would benefit the states in management of the species that you guys have to take care of. So as part of that, we began looking at just building a bigger, more collaborative effort. We agreed to move forward pending approval to be able to do so as a larger working group. We identified that there would be initially 1 commission representative from the 4 and 1 from the USGS regions to begin to coordinate that steering committee in a larger scale nationally. It's a 2-year appointment, and lucky for me, the Gulf was we selected to go ahead and start that process. So as of right now, we're beginning to work towards that and see what kind of things that we can share in common. And I think, Dave, you want to go from here?
So you'll recall during the TCC report, they made a motion to add USGS as a voting member to TCC, and that was approved. Similarly, I think that it would be useful to have USGS sit during the commission business meeting and give updates on their activities, similar to Fish and Wildlife and NOAA Fisheries do. This will help formalize this partnership and facilitate communications. One of the other things that we plan on doing is developing a kind of a priority needs document on research to help guide our research for the Gulf of Mexico. So I'm submitting to y'all the idea of inviting USGS to the meeting each year and having them kind of give a brief update on the activities they're working on and where they see some synergies. And if you guys feel that that's a good idea, then we'll pursue that for the next October meeting.
Any thoughts?
I'll at least have one. I think it's worth at least having them come at some point, because we are doing more and more things associated with USGS, and again, it's just a seat at the table to provide some information, and it's always good to have a name and a face and develop that relationship and have that direct contact. You know, we've seen that with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I think it matters. So I would be supportive of that, but I'm just one person. For the record, I see a lot of head nods in the positive in agreement. So I guess so.
Do we need a motion for this? Okay, well, I certainly think it would be beneficial. It's not much of a cost, if anything, for the commission in terms of travel, so seems like it'd be a good benefit.
All right, Mr. Donaldson, I guess you have your tasking then.
Thank you.
All right, so that's Steve. Is that some of your more question? All right, so move on to item number 12, selection of the 2025 Lyles Simpson Award recipient. So, I think someone have a. I don't think we actually planned for someone to have a motion.
So in your briefing book, there's a list of the past recipients and procedures for selecting recipients. So we just need to open the floor to nominations.
So the floor is open. Mr. Mace?
Yeah, I would like to submit Lance Robinson as a nomination.
All right. Do we have a second? Second by Mr. Hendon. Do we have any more nominations? Anyone move to close the nominations? Mr. Hendon moves to close nominations. Do we have a second? Second. All right. So I guess having Mr. Lance Robinson as a nominee for the 2025 Lyles Simpson Award, I think any discussion or any challenges or concerns with that? All right, then I guess he will be our 2025 award winner. So thank you. Quick and dirty.
I will reach out to him and let him know.
I think
point of information. Since Lance is originally from Alabama, does this count for Texas?
Well, so it gets better. So he was from Alabama. He went to Texas, worked for Texas, represented Texas, back in Alabama, representing Alabama on committee. So he's got the Gulf covered, I think. He is the new Corky. No, please, I'll take that back. Please strike that from the record.
Do not put that in the minutes, Cheryl.
All right, on to some program reports. IJ, Steve, you're still in the hot seat.
So I didn't move. Turn your attention to tabs M and N, and I provided these ahead of time, and I think you've heard several of these topics already over the course of the week. The main things, we are in the process of wrapping up the gray snapper or mangrove snapper profile. There have been a few delays recently. We're trying to get some final things tweaked, a lot of references that are missing. Once we get that plan complete, we will provide it to the TCC for their review, offer them a 60-day window to approve that. So hopefully within the next month or so, we should have it. Hopefully it'll be approved before the end of the year, or at least early next year. We were also directed to begin work on a revision to the Black Drum Management Plan, and in this case, it's going to become a management profile. We have identified the representatives for the task force, and we have been in the midst of trying to finish everything else with the mangrove snapper profile. We are trying to get a hotel lined up for November. We may shift our dates slightly as time progresses, but our first meeting should be sometime in November, likely in the Panhandle, trying to keep it north central. And that was published in 1993, I believe, the FMP, so it will be an extensive rewrite of the entire document. I anticipate by next summer having quite a bit of it put together, and we'll start talking about the next species to begin looking at for profile development next summer, and maybe have a recommendation in October from that. Other activities going on, we have been still encouraging that working on the triple tail tagging. The USGS has jumped in on this. They've tagged several fish over in Port St. Joe area. We've worked with the DMR, tagging some additional fish. The commission is actually backing out of this a little bit now that sort of the needle has moved on everybody else taking over telemetry. Texas is going to do some telemetry work on them with the SURF funds this coming year. There's a lot of interest in a species that we don't know a lot about. So that's sort of, I think our work begins sort of the pilot side of it and gives some preliminary information at least. Out of the mangrove snapper profile, we did find that one of the research needs is just understanding more about that species, habitat use, ontogenetic shifts. So we've been tagging this year a few fish. I did provide a few acoustic tags to 2 grad students, one at LSU and one at USM. They're beginning to do some additional tagging to look at the use by juvenile snapper of highly industrialized areas, the areas around Fourchon, Pascagoula River, and Bayou Casat, Mississippi, as well as the Theodore Industrial Canal over in Alabama. These fish just seem to love hard structure and deep water, and these ports and highly industrialized areas seem to be just a magnet for young mangroves, and people are starting to figure that out, and it's becoming a more popular species to target from shore as well as from things like kayaks and small boats. Again, you know, the cobia tagging, that's part of that USGS work. We've got 2 restore proposals in that I'm a part of. The likelihood of any of them getting funded is about as good as any. It's probably not going to happen, but it's a large Gulf-wide effort on one project, as well as one focusing more on the Eastern Gulf. We do have a project to look at historical tagging, looking at the old conventional tags from Jim Franks at USM, as well as more recent acoustic and satellite tags. That project was approved last year, was funded under Restore as a CIE proposal, Center for an Ecosystem and something. I can't remember the acronym. But that work is going to be done more in a analysis scenario. There's not actual deployment of anything. The logistics of it are that NOAA has provided travel funds to go to Santa Monica. They provided a NOAA postdoc modeler who's going to help us work up the data and see what potentially we could get out of combining all of those old data sets. And then currently, as you're aware, our SURF program, we've got additional funds for the coming year. That's been approved as of the TCC and the state federal and this commission through those reports. We just got confirmation this morning that we have approval from the Southeast Regional Office to go ahead and enter into those grants. So we should be getting contracts started sometime later this year for a January 1 start date for next year for SURF funds. And I'll answer any questions on IJ. Rolling on. If you turn to tab O in the briefing materials, quick aquaculture update. The 2023 projects are still underway, although we did have, because we had a few delays, there's been hurricane damage to some of the locations. There's been methodological problems, loss of power and life support systems for some tanks on one of the projects. So there's been an extension on a few. But those should all be wrapping up hopefully by the end of this year. Those were the 2022 projects. The 2023 projects are listed on that table. They are ongoing and moving towards completion by the end of this year also. We have had a couple requests for extensions, but that money is available for us to allow them to succeed. So if they've run into some problems, we've got some flexibility on those. But those are the pilot projects. We are not receiving any funds for that portion of the aquaculture program anymore. The Office of Aquaculture has elected to redirect into some larger single projects with a little more, I guess, bang for the buck. So they are continuing to support the Gulf Oyster Consortium. That's the SALT project, which is looking at genetics and developing lines of stock for various conditions from around the Gulf using Gulf stocks. They're in their 5th year on that, and they just received an additional partial funding for a 6th year to do continued grow out. They've got, I think, 3 generations of some of their broodstock lines now, which is pretty significant. And then the Integrated Multitrophic Aquaculture Project, IMTA, which is taking place off Dauphin Island. Technically, it's off Fort Morgan, but in Alabama waters, state waters. Dauphin Island Sea Lab received that award a couple of years ago, and it is a demonstration project for use of an aqua fort similar to what they use up in the Northeast, which is a floating cage system where fish are in the center of the cage, oysters and algae or mollusks and some sort of macroalgae hang off the sides, and they provide each other nutrients and support. And it's a kind of just a neat little mesocosm demonstration where you can grow multiple species in the same footprint and have marketable product. The project is a demonstration. It's a single cage with 2 small pens. It's been discussed a lot. It's smaller than the size of this room. They have ordered the materials, the cage materials. They had to have some special high tensile copper anti-fouling stuff for sharks and some other stuff, and everything is back ordered. And the main point of the project is to demonstrate, again, similar to the Ballela Epsilon project as well as the Mana Fish Farms project. What's the process to go through for permitting? This is not federal waters, it's in state waters. So it's a little bit different project than the others. And permitting is obviously the holdup on all of this. They have more than enough funds to get through the project in the time that's available to them, but they are still in year 2 working on year 1 funds because they haven't gotten permitting accomplished. They've been through the reviews. There's a lot of other steps they've got to take, but the minute that they get that permit, it's going to be a very rapid progress to get gear in the water, do the testing, and get animals in the water. So we're optimistic that sometime by, I think, late summer, early fall next year, they hope to have gear in the water and potentially animals. So at that point, we'll have a lot more to talk about next October, I hope. That's it for my report. I'll answer any questions if you have any.
Anyone? All right. Oh, so Jeff's not here, so who's going to pick up CMAP?
I'll just refer you to tab P in your briefing book. If you have any questions, get with me and I'll have Jeff address them.
All right, then we're on to Charlie Robertson with sport fish restoration.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, I'll start with sport fish, then I got a couple after this one. The sport fish, you can find the details in tab Q of the briefing book. So sport fish, let's see, there it goes. So the sport fish restoration program supports the work of the Artificial Reef Subcommittee. It's also support some of the invasive species work that we do for the commission with the Gulf and South Atlantic Region Panel, and also with our involvement with the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force, as well as the GARMAP program. So I'll start with the Artificial Reef Subcommittee. So we met twice this year as kind of our typical cadence for meeting. We met earlier in March down in Florida. We conducted a kind of our usual business, and we also held a memorial ceremony for Ron Lucan. So I just put a picture there of the group out on the reef dedication that we did for him. And we've got several reef balls that we're going to distribute across the Gulf with. The family wanted his remains to be placed in reef balls and scattered across artificial reefs in the Gulf. And so we were able to make that happen with some of the partnerships with the states and others. And then, of course, we met this week at the annual meeting, and you guys heard updates from what we covered during those meetings. And then we're also planning to kind of start back meeting with the Atlantic states. That's something that we've been trying to do for quite some time now. I know James is working on it when he was with the Artificial Reef Subcommittee, and they just had issues with getting back together since COVID. But now that we're past that, we're hoping that we're going to be able to pull some strings to get everybody back at the table and kind of build back those relationships that we had with the artificial reef members in the other states along the Atlantic. And so this is some information from the GARMAP program. I had mentioned last year at our meeting we were planning to deploy some reefs off of Mississippi, some new sites. So here we go. So these three are the initial sites that were put out in 2022. So we've got, this will be the third year of data that we've collected from these sites. And then we put these other three out last year in the fall. And so we're just now getting to where we've got the first year of data. These are Cat Island, FH911, and FH10, just north of the Barrier Islands in Mississippi. And then these ones kind of extend south. So we've got basically two transects that we're tracking water quality parameters about every 30 minutes while they're deployed. And so in total now, we're starting to build quite a bit of a data set with the water quality parameters. We've got just under 200,000 data points. It might actually be now a little bit more than that since we've been collecting. These are just what we've got uploaded into the database at this time. And that's across the 6 sites and altogether 42 different deployments. So I think at each site we do around 4 deployments a year. They're putting them in about every 2 to 3 months. They can soak before they pull them back up and download the data. You can find all this on our database. Let's see, I think that might have been my only slide. No, we've got, you've probably seen this before, but these are the cages that are deployed. It's a ropeless system, so the water quality sun goes inside this cage. They drop it on the site. There's no evidence that it's there for anybody at the surface. Once they're ready to be retrieved, the user drives over it. They've got a handheld device on the boat. They can trigger the float to then release to the surface to be recovered. At that point, they'll switch out the signs, get the old one out. You can see they're pretty dirty when they bring them up, and so there's some maintenance and things that need to be done. The new ones are covered with anti-fouling to prevent that happening. They've got scrubbers on them to keep the probes clean. Let me go back just a little bit. And Joe, could you pull up, I wanted Joe to pull up for just a second. He created a dashboard for us to be able to upload the data. So we're working with the Gulf Coast Research Lab. We've contracted them to help us with the deployment and maintenance of the sondes for the GARMAP program. And Joe built this site so they can go in and they can upload the data. And so this is just the dashboard on the homepage, and it gives us just kind of some quick information about the number of deployments we have, the number of locations at sites that we're collecting data, and then the data points. And then below that, you'll see listed, these are the first 3 sites, and you kind of scroll down for just a second there, Joe, you can see these are the new sites. And this gives you just a quick glimpse at the data the entire data set for each one. It's got 3 parameters that we're mostly concerned with. It's got temperature, salinity, and dissolved oxygen levels. And so you can see this is the continuous data. It's got your timeline there. It shows you kind of just a snapshot or a glimpse at what we've been recording over the time series that the data is being collected. And if you scroll back up to the top ones, Joe, and I had Joe add this because at the beginning of the program, we had a few issues with the data recording of the loggers. We had some batteries went out on some of them, probes failed on some of them, things that happen, and these were kind of learning curve issues where we had to troubleshoot and come up with solutions to keep the batteries from getting moist and corroded. But we had some data gaps there, and I wanted him to build those in so we can see, during those time series where we had interruptions. And Joe, so if you'll click on FH13 down here, I just wanted to show you can click on each one of these. We can go in and get, a little bit more detailed information, so you can see what each of these parameters look like over the time series that we have. And Joe, if you'll show them, you can kind of click through the different parameters. There's a whole suite of different parameters you can look at. And if you want to drill down a little bit more, you can you can change the date range here. You can also click on one of the data points. So these data points are average from the day. So there would be, what's that, 48 recordings each day, and this averages them. So we can just see what that day looked like, and then you can kind of drill down into the days if you need to. So pretty neat dashboard that Joe's built for us. It's been really helpful to kind of see how data looks as we're getting it uploaded in pretty near time. And so Joe, would you go now to the deployment page? Oh, actually, yeah. And this is the table, so you can see the table of what all of the parameters look like at once. So you've got all the different measurements of DO, salinity. There's a TDS, turbidity, things like that, pH. All right, now you can swing by the deployment page. And so this is a list of all the deployments. So each time the research lab uploads data, it sends us an email and says, hey, they've uploaded some data. So then we know to come in and look, and this tells us all the information. You can look at the details from the deployment. It tells you the time the sign was put in, the dates, the location, which signs were part of that suite of signs on the probe at that time. You can export the data from the CSV there. So it's been a really useful interface that we've had. It's kind of streamlined the whole process of getting the data. And then just one more thing, Joe, if you close that out, and would you go to the inventory page? So this just helps us manage the inventory. You can imagine there's quite a bit of money invested in these things. We've got a lot of signs. The traps are pretty expensive themselves, and so this helps us to manage when we have a broken or a decommissioned piece of equipment. We keep track of it in here. As we get new things, we'll put them in here and keep track of all that stuff. And that's it. And I think that's all I have for, leave it on there. I see a hand coming up.
General Spraggins.
Yeah, Charlie, just a question. Back in the middle of summer, we was having some issues there in Louisiana State University. Some of the scientists was putting out stuff about a dead zone. And in some of this area about where you're looking at, did you see anything that added to that? Or, I noticed on some of your oxygen levels or something, it was way down in like July, August or something. Is that what they were looking at, or is it something else was giving out information?
Well, that's a good question. And yeah, so Joe, if you'll go down to the new sites, these are the offshore ones. Go down to the bottom 3. So LSU, we've been meeting with LSU intermittently, and they're aware of this data, and they're building some models right now. They're interested in trying to integrate this data into some of the models that they're building to help predict and measure these dead zones. And we did see some pretty interesting stuff. Let's see, which one is it here? If you go, well, yeah, if you click on FH3, Joe, I can see it right there. Milligrams per liter, it's the bottom one in red. And when you see it drop below 2, or even just kind of just slightly above 2, that's where what we would consider hypoxic. And so you can see right here, for, from the end of May, you had a pretty long period till about the middle of July where you spent most of your time below 2 milligrams per liter. And then look what happened here. In middle of July, I mean, all the way through. I don't know if this was something with the data saw that here where it hit 0. I mean, it's possible that it zeroed out to 0 for that extended time period, but I mean, that would be concerning. There was another one. I mean, even this one here was a little bit surprising. You see hypoxia in the summer, but here is January, and you've got a dip all the way down to 0, and I don't know how long that is, but it looks like each point is a day, so it was for at least one day below 2. Joe, would you go back? I think there was another site, one of the new ones that we had. I want to say there were 2 drops below 2 milligrams per liter during the winter, and that was kind of surprising. Yeah, down to the next one here. Oh, maybe I'm not remembering that correctly. But yeah, to answer your question, I guess there's been, this has been helpful to see when those hypoxic conditions are coming in, and we're able to measure that, how long they're lasting when they're coming in. You can see some of the trends with temperature and salinity, how they relate to that as well. And one other thing I failed to mention is we've got, working with Steve's group, the IJF, they're doing, they've got some acoustic receivers, and we've been putting acoustic receivers on each one of these so that we can track any acoustically tagged fish that are in the area. The receiver's recording that data, and so we're tracking fish movements in conjunction with water quality. So there's the ability to do some comparisons and some analysis there as well.
Yeah, and one of the things I was looking at, I mean, you just take FH2 and look at it and look at the salinity, and you go into the June time frame, July, and the salinity is holding pretty level, but yet the oxygen level is way down.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I'm just wondering, is there anything by the data that you're being able to pull up, is there anything that is giving a reason to why we're seeing any of it? We haven't seen big fish kills, and that hasn't happened. But normally when you see that, you would see some fish kill, with a low OD for several, especially that time frame when you were showing May to July. You'd
right.
think it would be something, but.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we'd necessarily expect to see fish kills. This is about, I think FH2 is in around 60 feet of water, and these sondes are measuring at the very bottom. They're sitting on the seafloor, and so, we're not sure where the hypoxic zone exactly is, if it's just straddling that lower stratosphere or if it's kind of higher up in the water column. We really don't know how high it's going, but I suspect there's some level in there at which the fish are able to get up above the low DO into water with oxygen, or they can just simply move out of the area. But I'm not sure. I haven't been able to see anything looking at the temperature and salinity to show that, we had an influx of some different water conditions that have come in. There's nothing that I'm qualified to be able to read here that I'm seeing.
We were just reading, I was just talking, and it's amazing what if we'd have had this in 2019.
Yeah. Let's see.
Chris, sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, it looked pretty clear to me, but maybe it's not that clear that the DO seemed to follow the salinity down, or DO went up when the salinity went down in general.
On that, yeah, I didn't see them together there.
And, that would indicate that you're getting some nutrient loading that's creating a situation where the oxygen gets used. And I mean, I think that's, makes sense to me.
Yeah, there is. I do see a little sharp trend up on FH3 around where the salinity. I mean,
in order to get those low DO events, you also have to have a certain amount of stratification, certain amount of stability. You've got to have the tides and the wind. I don't know if it would mix down to 60 feet or not, but you do have to have a certain tidal situation that would allow for that.
yeah,
that's great. That's some terrific data. That's fascinating.
And there have been some theories about upwellings from offshore coming in and affecting, and even some spring water that could be pushing up offshore that's causing some low DO situations in some cases over some short period of time. Things that we wouldn't normally be able to measure or even see because they're 40, 50, 60 miles offshore. And in a lot of cases, people that are collecting water quality, they're collecting it near the surface just one time, and then they're moving on to the next site. So to be able to have this continuous data set from the bottom has been pretty eye-opening.
Mr. Mace, did you have a question or comment? Okay. Okay. Are you still up there, Charlie?
Yep, I think I'm still up. You can close that out now, Joe. Thank you. And Joe built this all in-house, by the way. He's got some skills. All right, so the A&S program update. So again, this is partially supported by some sport fish funds. They support our involvement with the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force, and then we're also involved with the Gulf and South Atlantic Aquatic Species on Gulf and South Atlantic Region Panel on Aquatic Invasive Species, GSARP. So we met kind of the similar to sport fish. We meet twice a year with the GSARP. So we met in May earlier this year in Mississippi. And then we're going to meet again this November in Austin, Texas. We've got quite a few new members that we've added to the panel to help us kind of boost our engagement and participation across the regions that we're covering. We're filling some vacant seats that we had to, I guess, reach out to agencies that haven't been really engaged and kind of re-engage them. So we're looking forward to this new group and trying to move forward with some of the issues on invasive species. We also met twice, or we're going to be meeting again in November. We met back in April with the Aquatic Nuisance Species Task Force. This November, we're going to be providing some updates on our mission and priorities and threats from the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission. So we'll take the opportunity there to highlight some of our interests. And then within the task force, at our last meeting, I was appointed as the Lionfish Prevention and Management Plan Liaison. So what that means is that I get the joy and pleasure of reaching out to a lot of the folks in your states and at the research institutes that are working on any sort of lionfish control tournaments, some of the NGOs and things, and trying to compile what work they've been doing, whether or not they've been referencing or using the things that were recommended through the Lionfish Prevention and Management Plan, and then reporting this back up to the National Task Force. Yeah, you guys are doing a great job in Florida, I'll say. We're wrapping up the small grants program. I think we've reported on this for the last few years. In 2021, we selected the last round of projects, totaling $177,693. So we've got one still ongoing with the University of Florida to investigate and identify invasive species threats in Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. The other two that are completed this year are the University of Tennessee and North Carolina State University that were evaluating invasive armored catfish and Midas cichlids in Puerto Rico rivers, and then a Mississippi State University project looking at integrating controls for aquatic weed, the alligator weed. And I'll just quickly cover the ones that were completed. So the invasive armored catfish and Midas cichlids in Puerto Rico, they were trying to develop and test different methods to remove Midas cichlids and these armored sailfin catfish, which just looks like a giant plecostomus if you're familiar with fish, aquarium fish, and then conduct surveys to assess the extent of these invasive species in the Puerto Rico rivers. So what their results showed was that electrofishing methods got almost all of the fish out of some areas, but the invasions just persisted. So even though there were just a few stragglers, that was enough for the invasive fish to just kind of remain there. And then the Midas cichlids were pretty widely distributed, while the armor sailfin catfish were a little more limited in their presence. The alligator weed project, so Mississippi State, they were evaluating the effectiveness of herbicides and thrips, which is this little beetle you see here. It's a beetle that kind of eats the vegetation and damages the plant. So it's a biocontrol to see how that affected the alligator weed. So they were testing how to integrate chemical treatments and biological control methods to see where these beetles could control alligator weed and whether or not this was feasible. So their results showed that herbicide and thrips alone didn't significantly reduce the alligator weed biomass, and that integrated control methods showed really not a significant improvement over just herbicide only treatments. So we continue to use the invasive species traveling trunk. That's another thing that's been really popular at the commission with the invasive species program. We have this trunk full of all of these things that you see here that we use for outreach and education. Folks can request it through our dashboard, and we'll ship it out to them to keep for however long they need it for whatever events they're having. We've utilized it for 1,834 days since it was released in 2012. And I think we had another 100 days it was in use this year at, I think, 6 or 7 different schools or events. I will add we're building some now for all of the states that are involved in GSARP. So we've got 3 at the commission that we use. I've just built the first one and sent it out for the Museum of Natural Science in Mississippi. And then I'm working on ones for Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina that we'll hope to have sent out by the end of this year. And it's basically a duplicate, if you will. There's a few specific things that some states requested that differ from the others, but they'll each have their own to use in their states for their outreach events. So I'll take any questions.
I think we're all good. So you're still on the table.
All right. We'll save the best for last. Return them right. So I think most of you were able to be around for the general session that we had yesterday. So we got to cover a lot of the work that Return them right's done. So I can kind of breeze through some of this, but so our goal, obviously, is to reduce post-release mortality for reef fishes in the Gulf. Doing this is going to hopefully increase the health of the fisheries, and we all want to improve the angler experiences. So we're doing this by providing tools and training. We're measuring the prevalence and use of the devices and different trends that we're seeing in the fisheries. This is a lot of our data collection and monitoring that the commission is leading right now. and validating mortality rates and effectiveness of release treatments, which is some of what the studies that you heard yesterday are hoping to do. So I won't go into too much detail, but we've got 4 studies. This was the majority of the sessions yesterday. I know there were a few of you that weren't there, so just to touch on this a little bit, we had one study out of Alabama that was looking at different at survival of using different release methods at different depths for red snapper. The results from that study essentially show that there wasn't a whole lot of difference between surface release and venting tool use as far as survival goes at depths of around 100 feet and less. I think what the conclusion of that study ended up being that, it's really important for us to get fish back in the water as quickly as possible. And then there were 2 other studies that looked at depredation rates related to use of descending devices, and what was seen and kind of highlighted in the Florida Sea Grant report was that there's really little to no evidence of predators taking fish being released off of descending devices. And the last project, they were looking at gag grouper. This was, the project site was off of Steenhatchee. And unfortunately last year, they had their acoustic arrays set out, they're acoustically tagging gag grouper, and I don't remember the name of the hurricane, there's been so many lately, but whichever one went through the Big Bend area of Florida in 2023 went directly over the project site and dislodged and toppled over all of the acoustic arrays, which required them to have to go out, recover them, fix them, and then redeploy them. Unfortunately, they redeployed them this year in August and had scrambled and went out for 2 days and tagged fish at the end of September, right before Helene came through and just completely decimated the site again. So they're in recovery mode. I don't know what we're going to get out of that project, if any of the results will give us what we were looking for, but I'm sure the PI will be able to at least get some sort of important information out of that, or at least we hope. But they will all be done, if they're not done already, by the end of this year. So we've been doing some monitoring. We covered that Sea Observer programs a little bit. We're expanding into Texas and Louisiana, and although this isn't Return 'em Right, we're coordinating pretty heavily with Greg and the IRA funding initiatives to collect this data in Louisiana and Texas. We're completing the 3rd year in Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi of our standardized data collection methods. At this point, I think we have a little over 1,100 for-hire recreational trips that have been observed across those 3 states. And as I just mentioned, we'll be expanding into Louisiana and Texas here soon. We're also collecting information from the dockside validation surveys that are administered through those 3 states, Florida, Alabama, and Mississippi. And we've surveyed just over 3,500 trips. And then the Southeast Region Headboat Survey is also collecting information about use of descending and venting on the trips. We're completing the 2nd year of data at the end of this year from that survey. During the 1st year, we had 8,955 trips that reported information, so we're expecting about that same amount this year from the data set. So a lot of data and a lot of trips. Outreach education. This is being led by Florida Sea Grant, but it's a pretty tight-knit program, and we coordinate pretty heavily with them. They are administering this online training course, which is pretty short. It's about 15 minutes. After they complete it, they get a device, and right now we've reached about over 38,000 Gulf Reef fish anglers have gone through this program. Not all have gotten devices because some of them aren't eligible. But we've had that many people go through the education and training module. We've had really, really positive feedback with those that have gone through it. And this was mentioned a few times yesterday. We published our best release practices manual for reef fish earlier this year. It covers all of the best practices that the program is encouraging. So I would recommend that you guys check that out. We had referenced it a few times in the discussion yesterday, and it's a really good, thorough look into the situations that anglers might encounter, and it gives them kind of a flow chart of how to go about some of the decision-making processes to come up to what would be the best practice certain situations for releasing reef fish. So next steps, expanding coverage in the Gulf. We're completing the research studies that I just talked about. We're going to finalize building an ATSI database here soon where all of the ATSI observer data will be warehoused and we can produce reports and the states can upload it directly into it. It'll validate all of the data, so the error checks and things to make sure that the data is right. We're doing a human dimension survey, the second of a two-part series. We'd done the first one 2 years ago, and we were hoping to have the second one running right now, but we decided to delay it since the impact from the hurricanes. We wanted to allow the Florida anglers to kind of get back on their feet before we start asking them questions. And then building awareness about best release practices, obviously part of our initiative. And I'll take any questions if you guys have any.
All right, I don't see any. Thank you, Charlie. And Greg's back up with the FIN and Inflation Reduction Act.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to start by thanking my colleague Charlie for his acknowledgement and recognition of the Gulfin program and saying we've saved the best for last. So I hope my program report lives up to that expectation. So just a brief look at what we're doing this year. 2024, we're continuing to work on the topics you see in the list here, and just to give you some summary stats, we've collected over 30,000 angler dockside interviews, completed over 5,000 telephone interviews of for-hire captains. We've provided partial funding to LA Creel. We've provided funding to Texas to support recreational red snapper monitoring. We've provided funding support for the implementation of Alabama Snapper Check. On the commercial side, we've received over 160,000 landing reports, and my greatest excitement is that by the end of this year, we will have 5 states in the production version of the vessel tool created by Bluefin Data for electronic trip ticket reporting. That's a statement several years ago I thought we'd never be able to make, and here we are, and I'm excited about that, and I'm even more excited to hear about the states that have really embraced one of the largest strategic planning priorities that came out of our most recent Gulfin planning meeting was to move away from not only the old PC trip ticket system, but move away from paper reporting. And by next summer, we'll have 2 states that have accomplished that and other states that are working towards that very thing. It'd be an amazing accomplishment to think that we would be fully electronic in commercial landings reporting, and thankful for the efforts that are being made on that. We do have a limited biosampling program going on this year. It just started July 1. 3 states requested funding for that, and we were able to provide a small amount to help augment what they were already doing. Outside of the Alabama Snapper Check data, all of the data that I've mentioned here, recreational, commercial, and biological sampling data, all flows into the FIN data management system, and we disseminate that to support data requests for federal stock assessments. We have 3 other projects that we're working on this year, and I'm going to give you a slide for each just to summarize a little bit of each of them. So first, we have an IRA, stands for Inflation Reduction Act, agreement with NOAA Fisheries. We've convened 2 workshops in 2024 aimed at trying to investigate new approaches to 2 critical areas of recreational data collection that have been points of contention for a significant time now. The output of those workshops is we published an RFP on October 1 where we're soliciting proposals for projects aimed at advancing our data collection efforts in both of those areas. And we've already received a great deal of interest on this, and we're very optimistic we're going to get some strong proposals to help shed some light on how we can do a better job at this. We do have 1 more workshop planned for February of next year, and we're working, that one's specific to work on developing some recreational data standards under Gulfin and begin the process of building a centralized warehouse to store and disseminate state recreational survey data. you've heard this as well this week. We're excited to have access to another $1 million of Inflation Reduction Act funding to attempt to expand our for-hire at-sea observer program into the Western Gulf. So we're working to hire and train independent contractors. We're working to identify voluntary participants from the for-hire fleet to allow us to ride trips offshore to collect biological measurements from released reef fish. We want to observe release practices. We want to do some tagging, and all of that's made possible through some IRA funding that we've received. This actually speaks into one of the research priorities, which is improving our understanding and actually enumeration of recreational release catch data, and this is one method that'll help us work towards that. In August of 2023, we were approached by Southeast Fisheries Science Center staff with another funding opportunity. Many of you are aware that as of December 31 of 2020, the old cellular 3G devices that shrimp vessels carried for monitoring effort were outdated and no longer transmitted data. And so some monies became available to start an early adopter program to where we could put some new devices that would transmit effort data back to NOAA Fisheries to try to reestablish a way to monitor shrimping effort. We ran an RFP. We ended up contracting with LGL Ecological Associates. As of last month, currently they have, and they're running the whole show for recruiting and installing and interacting with the shrimp industry. Currently, they have 204 volunteers. The largest majority of them come from the Western Gulf, but there are volunteers from all 5 states. They've completed 90 installations. There's 3 devices that are available, but LGL recently reached out and they're testing a 4th device from a company that approached them. They gave them a couple devices for testing, and they're going to install them on a willing participant alongside one of these other devices for kind of ground truthing. The average cost per installation runs about $2,400, and the funding that's provided also allows them to reimburse for cellular fees associated with these devices for at least as long as the project can run, which is through 2026 at this point. LGL estimates they have enough funding to support probably 50 more installations, and they have obviously more volunteers than they're capable to do installations on. So kind of in a holding pattern right now because there's the potential that there's going to be some additional monies provided on this agreement to be able to do a little bit farther reach with the number of installations. But until that happens, LGL's just planning on at least doing those 50 and then pausing, because without the new monies, the funding that they currently have is going to run out. Lastly, tab T in your briefing book gives you a look at our proposed funding and projects for 2025. I will say that what's on your slide here has changed a little bit based on the motion put forward by the State Federal Fisheries Management Committee and the approval that you gave that. Today, the list here is based on that approved motion. So instead of what we started with was $8.9 million of Gulf Fin funding proposed, we've trimmed that down to 7.3, and that's because we're operating under a continuing resolution and the likelihood of level funding is extremely high, and we were at a significant funding shortfall at our full proposed funding level. It was around 21% short. So these are the programs that were recommended, that were approved for funding in 2025. And that still is at a smaller shortfall, but we're working to do the best we can to minimize that. As some follow-up to the state federal members that are around the table, there is the possibility, if we can get the allowance to use that underspending we talked about, I think we could get the shortfall down to about 3.5%, and that would, it's a lot more palatable than 21. So. And lastly, As I mentioned, we're still in the middle of the Inflation Reduction Act infrastructure agreement. I put this up here just to also remind the group that part of that agreement, we are reprioritizing some of the funding, shifting it out of the pot that was aimed at improving data management systems, such that we could prioritize helping to support the transition costs for implementing the Alabama and Mississippi state creel surveys that will be accomplished over the course of 2025 and 2026. And so with that in mind, I still feel very confident that we have enough money to improve and build the data warehouse that we'd like to build. So we're excited that we think we can do two really great things here with the available money that's been provided. So, and Mr. Chairman, just a final thank you to the staff that everyone around this table provides. It makes our jobs easier, and the work that we get done is only accomplished through the collaborative efforts of state and federal partners. And so just a big thank you to everyone around the table for the people you provide. That concludes my report.
Thank you. It's always good to see money being spent, you know.
Yeah.
And any questions for Greg? Most of us saw those presentations previously, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
All right, so we're running toward the finish line here. So the executive committee report. So Dave's going to touch on that real quick for us.
So everyone, we met this morning prior to State Federal. Everyone should have a copy of that report. There was one addition. We did talk about adding Juneteenth as an official commission holiday, and that was approved by the executive committee as well. So we just need a motion to with that inclusion to accept this report.
All right. So Mr. Hendon, and who was the seconder? Mr. Nelson. Okay. Any discussion, questions? All right. Motion carries. All right. The state director's report. So first up is Florida, Dan Eleanor.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it pretty brief. A lot of the stuff we've already talked about. So we got some new snook regulations that took place. We introduced 9 new regions for snook, allowing tailored regulations to be based on regional valuations. Specific close season bag limits, slot limits established to promote sustainable fishing practices. Refish management, mandatory possession of vicinity devices on vending tools on vessels to enhance survival rates. Aim to improving catch and release practices to support fish populations. Onto our 2024 Gulf red snapper season, we had a record 103 days, the longest since state management began. The season includes both summer, June 1 through July 31, and fall segments featuring major holiday weekends. Our line fish challenge was a success this year. We had record participation with over 31,000 fish removed. Highlights community engagement efforts to control invasive species in Florida waters. Commercial fisheries updates. We will be transitioning to electronic trip reporting via vessel application for enhanced efficiency and data accuracy. Notable decrease in trip ticket records in 2023 kind of made us do this, and the need for ongoing monitoring. So that'll take full effect next year. We did some stuff with stone crab. We implemented new regulations to ensure sustainable harvesting for stone crab, including escape rings, and we increased the minimum claw size. We have some oyster restoration efforts going on, ongoing initiatives for oyster restoration in Apalachicola Bay, focusing on habitat improvement and stakeholder collaboration. We're still working on EN disaster request. And then, like I was saying about electronic reporting, it'll take effect in 2025. So that's pretty much some highlighted points that we have going on.
Any questions for Florida? Now let's move around the room. How about General Spraggins?
All right, just a Mississippi update.
Unless you want to do Louisiana's or mine.
Well, I would like to, I would like to do Alabama's. I don't want to do Louisiana's. All right, now, just to give you an idea, a couple of things, we'll keep it real short. I think you have a copy of it anyway. And so, our artificial reefs, we did deploy 77 of the super pyramids across about 12 different sites. So that's something that we're looking at. We deployed about 860 artificial reef ecosystem discs also. And we, in the process of 2 new areas of about 16,000 acres being permitted. So which will almost double the size of what we have. Red snapper, we had a very low season of, we closed from May 24th to July the 7th and 60,000 pounds, and that got us to 93%. We didn't go over this year, so we're there, and we'll readjust for next year. We had about 398 derelict crab traps that were removed in February, and then additional 124 crab traps were removed by the staff. But it's something that since 1999, we started that program, we've removed about 23,000 derelict crab traps. So that's a lot of things out of the water there. Off-bottom oysters, we got about 61 acres leased and 46 farmers that are working there. Our culch plant, we've deployed about 18,000 cubic yards on 138 acres. And we've also deployed about 95 million oysters spat from a private industry. Our microbiology lab is complete now, and we have it certified by the FDA, which is something that we've been working on very hard. Stock assessment, we released 80,000 spotted sea trout fingerlings across the 3 coastal counties, and an additional 26,700 of them were larger size, 6 to 8 inches. So we're trying to do different ways of looking at what we can do. Successfully reared 23,000 juvenile southern flounder, and so things are working there. We're also on bottom. We started our lease process, which will go out, and we will be accepting leases to the 1st of December for 80% of all of our bottoms. So all of our oyster reefs that we have permitted that are there, we're up to 80% of it. We're going to lease out to private industry, trying to follow similar models of what Louisiana and Texas are doing. And so I think it's going to be what turns that industry around, and being able to put the people there to have the money to be able to operate it. But other than that, we're just trying to keep our head above water in South Mississippi.
All right, Jason, you want to do Louisiana?
Yep, I'll be brief, just the high points of a few sections from our report. So on disasters, back in February, the NOAA allocated $27.1 million to Louisiana for Hurricanes Laura and Ida. We submitted that draft spend plan in June, and actually right before this meeting, we got our second round of comments back from NOAA. So I will report that they are moving much faster than they were in the past. So hopefully that will continue. On the 2019 flood disaster, which is still ongoing, believe it or not, we have a little over $38 million that's allocated towards equipment grants. We opened that grant program, the application in December of last year, and as of September 20th of this year, we had 1,741 valid applications that had been submitted. Each one of those applicants is eligible for up to $30,000. Of those, 996 were in one or more review process steps. We've completed 109 inspections, so we've got staff going out making sure that they're actually getting what they said they did. 420 of those have been paid, and that's about $11.7 million has already gone out the door on that project. In artificial reef, the highlight there is our program is starting to look into the development of a second fish attracting device buoy, so a second FAD buoy. The first one is south of Venice right now. This one is going to be a little bit further west, south of Grand Isle, if it gets approved. On the crab side, we got our final Marine Stewardship Council report that was published in March. And that recommended continued certification of the blue crab fishery in Louisiana with 2 conditions, and both of those were related to diamondback terrapin status and management. Our Lacreel survey, we interviewed almost 10,500 recreational fishing trips, which comprised over 27,000 individual anglers, and we surveyed almost 50,000 license holders for their fishing effort during the last fiscal year. Agent growth, we almost 11,000 otoliths were aged by our staff. Things that were from collecting from those surveys. On the shrimp, in our shrimp program, doesn't look too good. Our brown shrimp landings in fiscal year 24 were the lowest on record since our trip ticket program began back in 1999. There was a 61% decrease in landings and a 74% decrease in value compared to the 5-year average. Our white shrimp landings weren't that much better when it comes to value. We saw a decrease of 5% in landings, but a decrease of 54% in value compared to our 5-year average. In oysters, we're in the middle of implementing an e-reporting app by a company called Shellcatch for public seed ground daily reporting requirements. We had it last year as a voluntary option. Our commission recently, with the opening of the season coming up, made it mandatory. So the app use is mandatory for this upcoming oyster season, and that is for them to report their daily fishing activity on the public sea grounds. We also planted approximately 300 acres of new oyster reef through culture plants. Our stock assessment crew is continuing to transition from the age structured assessment program to the stock synthesis 3 model, SS3. So that crew is having fun running 2 stock assessments at the same time for each of the species so they can do a comparison. It's keeping them pretty busy. Our Grand Isle crew is working on our Southern Flounder Fight Net pilot study, which is funded by some of the IJ money from this group, so we appreciate that. This last season, we encountered a total of 593 flounder in our fight nets, which is a CPUE of 3.7 flounder per net day. So that's much higher than what we were seeing in our normal sampling. And last but not least, a few regulatory changes in the state. This was effective June 20th. Our red drum regulations were changed. We have a 4-fish recreational bag limit now with a slot limit of 18 to 27 inches with no fish over 27 inches. And both guide and crew limits were eliminated on charter trips. Spotted sea trout, which went into effect November 20th of last year, is reduced to 15 fish recreational bag and slot limits 13 to 20 inches with 2 fish over 20 inches allowed. And again, guide and captain and crew limits were removed on charter trips. And then last, we implemented a mandatory bow fishing permit. It is a free permit. It's similar to our RLP permit for offshore landings. That went into effect in January, and any private anglers or charter captains that plan to go bow fishing for saltwater fish need to have that permit. And that concludes my report.
Any questions for Jason? Dave? So you mentioned the approval of the FAD. Who has to approve that? Is that?
It's got to go through the Corps.
Yeah.
All right,
So
let's move over to.
Are you getting any feedback from the first one?
I mean, we're getting positive feedback. Yeah, I don't have anything scientific or anything that I could present, but the word is that people are using it and they're happy with it.
All right, let's move over to Texas. Chris?
Okay. Texas had one noteworthy regulatory change this year and a couple of oyster proposals in front of the Parks and Wildlife Commission. Spotted sea trout harvest regulations were modified to include a 3-fish per person daily bag, a retention slot of 15 to 20 inches, and as of September 1st, 1 oversized trout greater than 28 inches may be retained with an oversized tag, and you can purchase a bonus oversight tag for the year. The Commission also approved the creation of an Oyster Advisory Committee. At the January meeting, the OAC will be comprised of various members of the public interested in assisting TPWD in ensuring the management of oysters in Texas continues to reflect the commitment to the long-term health of the oyster resources and the additional habitat and ecosystem services they provide. To help with this goal, TPWD has continued its efforts to map oyster reef habitat and restore degraded areas, and the Texas Commercial Oyster Mariculture Program continues to grow. As of September, there are 11 permitted grow-out sites, 10 additional sites in conditional status, and 30 other commercial aquaculture mariculture sites pending review or permitting status. There are 3 permitted hatcheries and 2 permitted nurseries. And so far this year, the commercial oyster mariculture folks have harvested 758,211 oysters. For Texas commercial fisheries landings from public and private reefs in Texas have been variable over the last 20 years. And in 2024, 223,772 sacks were landed. TPWD continues to assess the stock status for the 2025 oyster season, and there were significant flooding events in 2024 that contributed to oyster mortality in some Texas bays. And based on the results of sampling, only 2 harvest areas met the established thresholds for openings. The department recognizes the economic hardship that this may place on those involved in the oyster harvesting industry. And so attempting to balance the need for conservation of oyster resources with the need to provide fishing opportunities for the commercial industry, the department has elected to temporarily depart from strict adherence to established thresholds, adding 3 additional oyster harvest areas that contained some market oysters. Texas Gulf shrimp landings have been fairly stable since 2008. Ex-vessel values of Gulf shrimp had followed a similar pattern until 2023, when there was a 53% decrease in Gulf shrimp value due to lower dockside prices because of the competitive market with cheap import shrimp. 2023 landings were approximately 34 million pounds. The Texas Menhaden catch thus far in 2024 fishing season is a little over 600,000 pounds. And we're sitting at a little less than 2% of the 2024 total allowable catch. For commercial blue crab landings in 2023, they were slightly lower than 2022 at 2,223,069 pounds, worth approximately $3.8 million. During February, TPWD closed the state waters to crabbing with crab traps, allowing for the removal of derelict traps. A grand total of 1,198 traps were removed by 241 volunteers participating on board 65 boats. This year, TPWD bought back 9 commercial shrimp licenses and 1 finfish license with our buyback program. No other licenses were purchased from crab or oyster fishers. For the Texas Fisheries Dependent Monitoring Programs, the Trip Ticket Program continued to expand its commercial landings program to new dealers that either contacted the Trip Ticket Program after their license purchase or were suspected of needing to report. And as of June 2024, Trip Tickets has 245 dealers out of 299 using the vessel system for Trip Ticket reporting. In late 2023, Bluefin completed making summary reports available in production vessel, although these reports still do not include some of the deduction type reports that were available in the PC version. Also, while there were requests to Bluefin to include mariculture oysters, this has not been implemented yet. The Trip Ticket Program has been obtaining legal size oysters since December of 23 for the purpose of estimating the conversion of whole shell weight to meat weight used in the Trip Ticket database. Initial results of the oyster conversion data suggest that the previous conversion factor for oysters of 6.42 pounds of meat per 110 pound sack is likely not still applicable. Preliminary results show considerable variability in the conversion factor depending on harvest location, month, and sample type. but in general, the proportion of meat per shell is almost twice as high in maricultured oysters versus public reefs. They also obtained samples of blue crabs to estimate the average weight of crabs sold as individuals. Our original conversion factor for crabs was about a half pound per crab, but current results are closer to a third of a pound. And during Texas Parks and Wildlife's 2022-2023 Recreational Angler Creel Survey Year, 1,115 survey days were conducted at boat access sites along the coast. An estimated 4,750,520 angler hours were expended to harvest an estimated 913,935 fishes. Staff conducted 11,339 target interviews involving 31,303 anglers. And we had one of the longest red snapper seasons on record in over a decade. It ran from June 1st for federal waters, June 1st through September 6th, while state waters remain open currently. Let's see. Lastly, for other state fisheries-related programs, in our artificial reef program, 1 structure was reefed and 24 are in the process of reefing offshore. 6 nearshore reef sites are in various planning stages, and there's a tugboat for the Rio Grande Valley Reef in upcoming deployment. During FY24, the Fisheries Enhancement Program released over 18.4 million fingerlings into Texas public waters, and this summer we celebrated a major milestone with our 1 billionth fingerling release into Texas. So pretty proud of that milestone. Finally, staff at the Perry R. Bass Marine Fisheries Research Station conducted numerous research projects on taxonomy, life history, and genetics, including a Gulf States SURF program-funded initiative to investigate eDNA as an alternative sampling method in Texas estuaries. And they proposed to expand the Texas Acoustic Array Network to investigate residency, site fidelity, and large-scale seasonal movement patterns of selected fishes using bioacoustics. This concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for Texas? What were the fingerlings? What species, or is it a multitude of species?
Red drum, spotted sea trout, and southern flounder in total. Mostly red drum.
That's a lot of fish.
Yeah.
Big states, big numbers. All right, for Alabama, yeah, we don't have quite those numbers. Couple of things from a regulatory standpoint. We're going to try and host some public meetings probably toward the end of November to talk about the creation of a snook regulation. They have migrated from Florida to Alabama, so thank you, Dan. We are now creating a new fishery. Some sheep's head, red drum, triple tail, and southern flounder. We've seen an increase in some of our flounder populations, and so we're going to review our commercial landings regulations. And so potentially we'll have some regulation changes related to all of those coming next year. Our artificial reef program, we are still full speed ahead on that. A couple of projects, Alabama Power Company has agreed to fund the creation of a new artificial reef zone off the coast of Alabama, which would increase our reef zone by about 25 square miles. And recently they did a deployment of a tugboat and a multitude of concrete poles and a tower structure that they had. In addition, we have a yard at our Gulf Shores office here that has, we call it materials of opportunity, where people can leave things like culverts and concrete boxes and a variety of materials, and they are going to deploy all of that material that is currently on our yard into the reef zone once that the Corps of Engineers has granted that. We still have about $8 million in NIFWIF funds that we've been waiting on a report to discuss whether or not a multitude of smaller reefs provides a benefit over, say, a larger reef. I had a desire to sink a large vessel, but those it looks like the report's going to say, I think as we all would have assumed, that more smaller reefs is probably better for to enhance the artificial reef zone. So we will look to spend out that $8 million over the next year. We have seen an increase in private deployments over the last 2 years of artificial reefs. We permit those And in the last 2 years, we've seen about 1,500 private deployments, and in addition to the additional 411 reefs that we've deployed in 2024. So we continue to increase our number of reefs. We did a derelict crab trap cleanup, and I guess the benefit of having done this, our first one a few years ago, we accumulated a lot of traps, and we've skipped a year or two and did another one, and we only recovered 31 derelict crab traps. So I think that's actually a couple of things that we do allow shrimp boats the opportunity to recover derelict and not charge them for having someone else's property. We have a rule for that, and that the placement and the operation of those traps, I think, has made a difference. And again, these annual cleanups has reduced those number of derelict traps and ghost traps. We do have some deep water trap problems that we're going to continue to work on. Red snapper is, we have 664,000 pounds was our quota for this year. We went over a little bit, by 5,000 pounds last year, so we reduced it to the 559. We opened Memorial Day weekend for 4-day weekends, the Friday through Monday, and we were open the entire week of 4th of July. So that is still open. We report those fish through Snapper Check. Once school starts, that line flatlines. You can see our history at the Snapper Summary at Outdoor Alabama, that when school gets back, the needle barely moves, so we will probably be open through the end of the year. And we may look at, during our public meetings, we'll probably ask if there's a different season that may work well for others, and we're going to look at maybe making some changes next year. We are currently, as been mentioned a couple of times here, working with Louisiana and Gulf states and Mississippi to do a LaCreel style effort survey. So that is where I guess we're about 10 months into that now or whatever. So we're working on comparing the data. So far that seems to be going very well. So we're going to continue that into next year. Our oyster harvest for this year looks like we just opened the first week of October, and the weather has not been very helpful for that. We have a very small area that's open right now that is very susceptible to north winds, and we've had north winds. So we anticipate probably around 30 to 35,000 sack harvest. So it's not much. It's in line with what we've done the last 2 years. And we had a shell planting, or excuse me, a culch plant earlier in the year that was privately funded by the Alabama Wildlife Federation, and they also funded an oyster deployment of live oysters. So they deployed 2 million 1-inch size live oysters in an estuarine area to see if we can kind of enhance an intertidal area and see if that's a small scale project, to see if that might work on a larger scale, or it might just feed a lot of fish. We had a big problem with oyster drill predation in the close of our season last year, and we did not really have a lot of freshwater events. So we do have concerns for this season that the oyster drills have attacked again. On our inshore gillnet program, we completed the application with NOAA to receive the incidental take permit for sea turtles and dolphins. And interestingly enough, we partnered with them throughout the process, and the day we turned in the application, they said it would be 9 to 12 months for a response. I thought it would be like 30 minutes. And then the next week they said it'd be more like 15 months. So so the federal investigation with my name at the top continues. The Claude Petit Mariculture Center has 3 species that we culture there, the southern flounder, Florida pompano, and spotted sea trout. And we've partnered with fishing tournaments to do our brood stock. We have pretty good science guys. We apparently don't have pretty good anglers on our staff, so we have found that partnering with fishing tournaments and issuing them a permit for over the limit, and with flounder, especially undersized fish, they love it. They've really embraced that, and we do not have any problem getting new brood stock. And we've also begun a genetics testing for the flounder, where we go out and sample the flounder at these tournaments, and we're trying to determine if those hatchery-raised flounder are showing up in the wild population. So we hope to get some of that information over the next year or so. We're working on a couple of boat ramp improvements in the area, and as everyone knows, boat ramps and garbage dumps share some similarities. We all know we need them. Nobody wants them near them, but we are working on improving those. And
So are you putting a garbage dump across the river?
that's how some folks look at it. So I think that concludes my report for myself, and I'm free to answer any questions. All right, that's easy. That concludes the state reports. We are down to future meetings, and we have listed here October 13th through the 16th of 2025 in the fine state of Mississippi, and in 2026, October 14th through 17th, if Florida still exists. So if it gets cut in half, are they going to build a bridge? You know, it's like, geez. My heart goes out to the state of Florida this year. It's, please, I say that jokingly, but it has been
jinxed the hell out of
it has been a challenge. So, yeah, we'll get it next year. So, Dave, do we have any details for that?
No additional details. However, for whatever reason, we're having difficulty finding a hotel that has the meeting space for us to meet in Mississippi. We already checked for the week of October 13th through 16th with the Golden Nugget, and they're already booked. But they do have availability at the last week of October, the 27th through the 30th. So we may, because we're a year out, we may target that date. So,
General Spraggins?
Yeah, when you said they already booked, we might want to double check with them. We have a little pull on that. Maybe we can change it if you want to, but that's the day after the day cruising ends. Right. It's on the 13th, and I wonder if there's something going on that I didn't know about, but.
Nancy checked with them, a couple months ago? And they said they'd already had something booked, so.
Okay.
But I would suggest because we're a year out that they have availability on the 27th. And just everyone mark their calendar for the 27th and we go with that.
When is the Gulf Council dates for that?
That's the following week, the first week of November. So we'd have back-to-back meetings.
Wow, you just helped my marriage. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, so is everybody good with that? We look to move that for the last week instead of the week that's on the calendar there. Review of all committee listings.
So that's tab BB in your briefing book. It's by state. It has a list of each member for the various committees. Just please review it and either contact me or Cheryl Noble in the office if you have any changes. If you want to update a person or persons from on any of those committees, all we need is an email that you want to replace person X with person Y. So, but please look at that and get us comments by the end of the month.
And that's you again for the publications, right?
Yep, and this is just informational in tab CC and tab DD. It's just that information's in your briefing book, and just want to make you aware of it, and we'll answer any questions if you have any. So.
All right, and let's skip the election. Let's go to the fishermen trend, other business real quick, and let you just knock that out today.
Okay. So I sent out a letter from Ashford Rosenberg about the Gulf Commercial Fishing Program. She has presented in person and virtually a couple times about this. She in the letter she mentioned that they actually did a pilot earlier in the month and they had five participants from Texas and North Carolina, and did a variety of different training and activities. There's an agenda and a list of all the activities that they did over a week period of time. But I would suggest that for the next October meeting that we have her or a representative come and give us an update, because it's been a couple years since she's met in person, just to keep us updated on this program and where it's going and how it's going. So if there is no opposition to that, I will work with her and have that on the agenda for the next commission business meeting for next October.
I see the head nods around the table that I think we all think that would be a good idea. All right. Final business here, election of officers. So first up is, so the rotation for chair goes to the fine state of Louisiana. So I will entertain a motion to nominate the one and only member from Louisiana that exists.
So no, I can't make a motion, but I just want to say the current roster, your chairman, Jason is first vice chair, and General Spraggins is second vice chair.
I'll nominate Jason.
All right, Mr. Elmer, second.
I'll second.
Mr. Nelson. Any other nominations? All right. So any opposition to Mr. Rogan being chair? His boss? Yeah, he will let you assume that. Mr. Boyd.
Yes, sir. Just a question. What's the term of the chair?
2 years. The chair term is 2 years. 2 years. We did that because now that we meet only once a year. All right. Well, with that being said, congratulations. You are now officially the chair, and I will now take nominations for vice chair. And again, the rotation would go to Mississippi.
I thought we already did that. No, we didn't do them all at once. So General Spraggins is up. I would nominate the general.
All right, so we have a second. Mr. Nelson nominated General Spraggins, and a second by Mr. Roba from Louisiana. And any other nominations? All right, any opposition? All right, motion carries. So congratulations, General. I know this is what you wanted for Christmas. So it was on you. So that leaves the enthusiasm just can't. I don't know if that can be recorded in the record or not. But now for the second vice chair, and the rotation goes to the fine state of Florida. So any nominations for second vice chair? Mr. Hendon.
Nominate Mr. Brown.
Mr. Brown for. We have a second.
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Nelson. Any other nominations? Any opposition? Congratulations, Mr. Brown. You are in the rotation to be the third in line for the chair. So that concludes our agenda, unless anyone has any final or additional remarks.
I have to, as outgoing chairman and incoming chairman, I have a gift from the commission to both of y'all.
Now I'm nervous, and I'm not generally a nervous guy. I saw the paddle earlier.
Wait, he didn't know there was a gift. He might want to change
Yeah. We got wind shirts. Well, we got 2 extra large and a large. I'll let you guys fight over which size you need. But each of y'all, we have one for each of y'all.
Thank you. I appreciate that. right, so with that, I would accept a motion that we adjourn the 75th, that's amazing, 75th annual meeting of the Gulf States Marine Fisheries Commission.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, we have a motion, we have a second.
Second.
All in favor, go out that door right there. Thank y'all and have safe travels home.